Yes, indeed. Another Saturday night. Another Saturday night shoot the breeze. I hope you guys appreciate when you hear my voice, because that means that we're going to have a good conversation. It's going to be a good airworm for you to listen to and maybe even have some of these conversations in your own personal lives as well. So I hope you guys really do perk up when you hear me come on and introduce another episode of Shoot the Breeze. Shout out to Nelly in the chat, says good evening. Shout out to you. You know what it is. I like to give you guys a heads up on what we're discussing tonight. Tonight, we're going to finally get to this topic. Did you know Nana Walter Rodney challenged Jamaica's so-called motto, out of many, one people? We're going to discuss a message to the FBA, how a white man told a cold truth. We're going to talk about Zionism in Brazil and how Zionism in Brazil aids in narco evangelism, persecuting the Candomblé. We're going to talk about timeout boxes tonight, how this is a prime example of the school to prison pipeline. We're going to discuss African spirituality tonight. Is it smarter to build internally from Abrahamic practice or to build outside of them? So those are the things that we have lined up for you tonight. Do me a favor, hit the like button, share the show to your social media, hit the Cash App or the Super Chats. I don't know if I set a goal tonight or not. I don't think so, but donate to the show. Donate to the show and to the concept of what we try to do here every week by having this meeting place where we could discuss topics that would interest your typical Gaviite, Pan-Africanist, Black nationalist, etc. With that said, man, we're going to start the show officially. And on the side, I'll drop Shoot the Breeze topic number 1, as well as introduce any and all of my panelists. Again, make sure, hit the like button, share the show. Let's keep the conversation expanded, all right? Stay tuned.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. Just want to remind you guys before we get the show rolling that this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There are other shows on the network you are invited to tune into.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the Revolutionary Matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio.
Yes, indeed. Make sure you're also tuned in to Brother Bakari's BBN network. I spoke to him recently, on a call now too. But I think Brother Bakari is going to be coming back soon to do a live stream. So look out for that. Make sure you subscribe to his channel. Make sure you subscribe to Consider Cheek / Realm in the Bush, who's been broadcasting live from the continent of Africa. So you guys could tune in to her message to those who are interested in repatriating. Tune into the Forecast Radio, very active, man. He's on like 2 times a week. Having a real good conversations with Casidra. I see Anthony McPhail over there a lot of times. Real good conversations. So make sure to tune into his show as well. And last but not least, tune into Kofi, the Black Critic, who also, when he live streams, has very interesting conversations for those folks who don't claim Africa. I'll put it like that. Shout out to Daily Affirmations by Pauline saying good evening. Shout out to Only My Truest, who says watching from Fort Worth, Texas. And again, shout out to Nelly. Only My Truest, how did you come to find this program? Out of curiosity. And you guys are listening, man. Feel free to drop the city or country you might be listening from. Let's just get a real-time idea of who's tuning in from where. Are you tuning in from the States, the Caribbean, the continent? It'll be nice to know that sometime. So for now, it's just me. Provide Triggers for Evolution is also in the chat saying greetings to all. Greetings to you, sister. Thanks for being here. And thanks for pushing some topics and ideas and conversations on the Discord. If you guys have not done so already, join the Discord so that we can continue some of these conversations and have new conversations as well. Provide Triggers for Evolution says she is she is from Brooklyn, New York. I didn't know that. Provide Triggers. That's interesting. Daily Affirmation says South Florida. Oh yeah, she also reminds us about the blast that's coming this way. Yeah, we're gearing up for that. New York, in particular, for there to be much bad weather over the next couple days. College is supposed to open on Monday, and we kind of don't know if we're going to be doing remote learning or in person because we don't know what the storm's going to bring. So keep us in your positive thoughts, I would say. So that's cool. We have Fort Worth, Texas. We have Brooklyn, New York, and we have South Florida represented so far. So all from the U.S., man. Let's see if others will come along and they'll be joining us from somewhere else. But right now it's only me. Shout out to Brother Bakari, who said peace and Black African power to the Black African family. Right now it's just myself, but I could start off the program. Shoot the Breeze topic number 1 says, did you know Nana Walter Rodney challenged Jamaica's so-called motto, out of many, one people, in the Groundings with my brothers? So this is going to take us to a tweet. By the way, this topic was supposed to have come up like 2 weeks now. But we never got to it because I had it late in the program. And so this week I decided to bring it and put it right up front. So this is a tweet from Abibi Fu Rise. It says, any Black person interested in a Black-centered analysis on the Caribbean and specifically Jamaica, should read this book. Dr. Rodney calls Jamaica's out of many one people a straight up myth. I never knew a prominent scholar echoed the same sentiment as some of us. So this is the book by Walter Rodney, The Groundings with My Brothers. You know, I never read this book. I've read Walter's other popular book, but not this one. So this is a little interesting, but this tweet doesn't have any more to it. It doesn't say what Walter Rodney called out. You know, what was the conversation that was had? Yeah, how Europe underdeveloped Africa is the book I'm much more familiar with. But yeah, the tweet doesn't really. Let me see if I missed something on the Discord. But you know, I would like to be able to discuss his analysis, his breakdown. What did he talk about within the book? I didn't know I had to read the book before I could present the topic and shoot the breeze. So I apologize for that. I'm looking at the tweet. I'm looking at the not the tweet. I'm looking at the post on Discord, and it's only this one attachment. So I'm uncertain how to proceed with that. But I will say that, and some of you have seen it, and I'm sure you've heard me even talk about it before. This idea that Jamaica, which is predominantly a black country, definitely when you see something that's identifiable as Jamaican culture, is African, you know, folks who are at the forefront of that, and to see a Asian woman, I don't even know who this Asian woman is in these videos sometimes, talking about her, you know, because she has a little Jamaican accent, and she's talking about her granny passport is this, and that's her granny passport, and all this old foolishness. Coming and scolding Jamaicans, actually. Scolding Jamaicans, you know, about this idea that Jamaica's not a black country. And then to further see Jamaicans themselves under the video agreeing with what she's putting down is really interesting to me. And frankly, a bit of a shame, if I'm to be honest. A bit of a shame, you know. And they do it out of this same quote, which is also what the Asian woman threw in the faces of Jamaicans. She said, out of many one, right? And a lot of Jamaicans buy that. So, you know, I don't know, because I would have expected the attachment to kind of shed more light on what Walter Rodney would have said and his critique of that out of many one. But, you know, I just wanted to put that out there. You know, I just want to put that out there that I've seen that sentiment from Jamaica, even from the point of a Chinese woman, you know, coming and scolding Jamaicans around that concept out of many one and all that type of stuff. In the chat, Frank Rice is out there. He said, I know her. She's an arrogant colonizer. Yeah, she's quite arrogant. You know, Trigger Happy 262 is out there in the chat. He says, when you have other people in your country and they become the center of that country, that's basically out of many one people. Yeah, I get you. I get you. You know, but for black Jamaicans to really accept that, I find that to be something to shake your head at. I would have been curious to see what, you know, Walter Rodney would have said. I don't have the time to try to look it up and find a video live on the air. So when y'all post the prompt and the attachment, make sure it points to something that we can speak to without having to have known about it prior, you know? Make sure it's something that we could watch or read and kind of get some knowledge on it, and then we can discuss it. So whoever posted this topic, man, if you are hearing me, you know, repost it again. I'll definitely bring him back because it seemed like it would have been a great conversation. All right. In the meantime, let me find Shoot a Breeze topic number 2. I see Frank in the chat said Jamaicans set themselves up for the kind of disrespect that Chinese was spouting. Yeah, I mean, I feel you. Once you go along with that statement, out of many one and all this old, yeah, that's what's gonna happen. Should be topic number 2 tonight. Should be topic number 2 says, a message to my FBA brethren. This white man told a cold, hard truth. This takes us to YouTube. Hold on, gotta reshare it because StreamYard issues. So let me reshare that with you guys. This is gonna take us to. All right, make sure you guys can see it. You guys should be able to see it now. Okay, so we're gonna play this very short video, 1 minute video. I might play it twice just to make sure that we all get the gist of it.
Direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination. The powerful have their power, but we have something too. The capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and to act together. That is Canada's path. We choose it openly and confidently, and it is a path wide open to any country willing to take it with us. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination. The powerful have their power, but we have something too. the capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and to act together. That is Canada's path. We choose it openly and confidently, and it is a path wide open to any country willing to take it with us.
That almost felt like a Heil Hitler was going to come out at some point there. Frank Rice in the chat said, I went to Jamaica. A Chinese woman was in line in front of me. A black female customs gal let her through and grilled me for almost an hour. And I'm of Jamaican inheritance, making me Jamaican. Yeah, that's very possible to see, not just Jamaica, but in other parts of the Caribbean as well. KW Don 7 is out there. He says 3 of the Jamaican national heroes are non-black. 3 of the Jamaican national heroes are non-black. Just out of curiosity, how many national heroes does Jamaica recognize? That's an important number as well. With that said, Shoot the Breeze topic number 2 is a message to my FBA brethren. This white man told a cold, hard truth. Let me welcome in our brother Buana this week. Buana, how are you?
Koku, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First, let me say shout out to you, Koku, and brother Bakari. Y'all been doing the yeoman's job, checking in on me. I really appreciate it. So I really thought to publicly tell you and brother Bakari that y'all been holding the fort down for the Better Medicine podcast. And I really appreciate y'all brothers and all the other brothers too, who also sent me my condolences. So I really appreciate that. Let me just first say that and get that out of the way. I don't know. You want me to start to speak to this prompter or not?
Well, first of all, welcome back. We're happy to hear your voice, man. So welcome back.
Yes, man. Yes, man. You know how things go when people die. I know you're still going through your thing, and that could be a difficult. You have your ups and your downs, but if my mother was around, she would want me to get back on that horse and do what I need to do. So it is what it is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the chat welcomes you back. Sister Cheryl says, Buana. Trigger says, welcome back, Buana. KW Don 7 says there's 7. So 3 of the 7 Jamaican national heroes are non-black. Very interesting. Okay. I'm afraid to ask what that number would be in the Bahamas, to be quite frank. With that said, man, so this message to the FBI. So this white guy in the video was having a very, very interesting and not too coded of a discussion here. It's not too, you would have to be kind of daft not to pick up what is this white boy was putting down. And the invitation at the end is a very interesting very interesting thing, because who all is allowed to who all can be invited? What other groups of folks will we have to deal with who can be invited? That's a very interesting conversation. You guys, let me know what you guys thought of that 1 minute piece there from this white guy here. Before I go to Buana, let me just check something out. Let me just see if the chat says anything interesting. Someone says, Canadian friends, you should be proud of your leader. I listened to Donnie's Wobble just before Mr. Carney, night and day, from Ireland. Another person said, that was the best speech I've ever heard. Someone says, guts, dude, guts. Hope your friends come to help you when the bully turns on you. Take care, guys. We're in this together. Let's not give it to the bully. As Churchill said, you cannot negotiate with a bully. It stands true today also. Someone says the union do the power against the powers. Someone says great leader. What a wise speech, says another. Buana, before I go to you, I see Brother Bakai says play the video again. I kind of don't like doing that, but it's okay. I'll do it. I'll play it twice because it's a short video, just a minute or so.
Be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination. The powerful have their power. But we have something too. The capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and to act together. That is Canada's path. We choose it openly and confidently, and it is a path wide open to any country willing to take it with us. Be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination. The powerful have their power. But we have something too. The capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and to act together. That is Canada's path. We choose it openly and confidently, and it is a path wide open to any country willing to take it with us.
All right. Hopefully everyone got it now. KW Don said, this is the perfect example that thieves eventually fall out. Yep. With that said, I can see we have Black Steelers join us. Black Steel, how are you this week?
I'm doing great, Koku. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there. Thanks for coming through, man.
Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Black Steel, I want to go to you. You were able to see that video just now?
I saw the whole thing, yes.
Okay. The prompt says, a message to my FBA brethren. This white man told a cold hard truth. What did you take from that speech, Black Steel?
Well, I'm loath to call FBA my brethren since they're a ultra nationalist hate group, but I think that the Canadian Prime Minister is just really just articulating something that African nations have felt for since the end of colonialism, and even before that. So what he's talking about is just how the United States is weaponizing things like sanctions and tariffs as a way to get other countries to bow to what they want them to do. This is something that African nations have experienced for quite some time, South Africa, Botswana, and if all else fails, they go the route of Libya, right? Look what happened in Zimbabwe when the people of Zimbabwe decided to take back the land from those white farmers. Ronald Reagan hit them with sanctions, and that crippled their economy. So this is just something that has been happening for a long time. I think that the Canadian Prime Minister is just speaking because the reality is that the United States, especially with Trump as president, is just now focused on raw, naked imperialism. And I think that other countries see this. And the so-called rules-based order that existed, that was supposed to be in place to prevent another world war at the end of World War II was always a lie. It's never been a rules-based order because the rules only benefit the powerful. Right? So there was never a situation. But Canada benefited from this so-called order. So they were willing to look the other way. Now, as always, the empire turns around and eats its own, right? We call this the imperial boomerang, or as Malcolm X like to call it, chickens coming home to roost. The violence that is used overseas to, subjugate Black and African people and Asians and Latinos in South America, that same violence and that brutality turns around and comes back to the imperial core, to the United States, to the West now. So the same strong arm tactics that were being used against Zimbabwe are now being used against allies like Canada, allies like Denmark. And now they don't know how to handle it, But it was okay when it was being done to Mugabe and Gaddafi. It's okay when it's being done to people like Maduro or Hugo Chavez or any other, president of any in Africa or Latin America or Asia they didn't like. But now these same tactics are being used against them, right? So now they want to move away from the United States and trade with China. China has better deals. China offers more for your money. They let you trade for their goods in your currency. You don't have to have U.S. dollars to trade with them. This is very disturbing to the United States because that means you're getting from under our thumb. We can't really control you. So now the age of neo-imperialism is back, especially under this president. So these people in charge, they want the United States to be a white Christian ethno-state. That's what they really want. They may not say it, but that is their long-term goal, is to make America a white Christian ethno-state. They want it to be Saudi Arabia, except with Christianity and white people. That's what they really, really want. That's why they're always so close to these Saudi oligarchs. They like to have the way they do. They may not say it, but they're just really upset. Now Canada's speaking out because this plan of attack is being done to them. I would say that the United States has given up on global domination. They're willing to, but what they do want, they want hemisphere domination. They want the Western Hemisphere, meaning all of North America, all of South America, all the nations in the Caribbean. That is the American sphere of influence. And, China has a sphere of influence. Europe has a sphere of influence. Russia has a sphere of influence, but the Western Hemisphere is just going to be America's sphere of influence. It's like they're consolidating their resources. That's what this whole thing about Maduro was about. Not only that, but it's about bringing, those nations that think they're escaping, bringing them back into the fold. So where does this leave these people, these mentally deranged people who are talking about, foundation of Black America? I already said before, they want a white ethno state, right? It's so funny. The talk was first about reparations. Now it's about survival. And you're not surviving this without help from your people. You may need to get the fuck up out of here. All right? There may be a point where you got to get the fuck up out of here. And I don't know. They're shifting the chairs on the deck. They're rearranging the chairs on the Titanic as the boat sinks. But that's not really to say they're not dangerous, but just be aware of that. The potential for that to happen. But I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Yeah, really well detailed there, Black Steel. With that said, Sister Cheryl in the chat says I could be wrong, but it sounds like regular white people mad at wealthy white people for using hyper integration to allow to strengthen their economies. And this guy is saying no more. Yeah, that's a part of it. But what he's calling for That's the important. That's the real important part of it. Juan, you want to speak to that?
Yes, yes. So I'll start it slow. Shout out to you, Black Steel, for holding down the fort with Coco as well. Let me just start by saying this. What this uh Prime Minister is saying in Canada, um, Black Steel spoke to in a global way. But the reason why I brought it home in a local way is because I've heard a lot of these my FBA brethren. They still my brothers, even though I disagree with them. They are saying, they are cheering these ICE people on and basically saying, y'all tethers, y'all black people, y'all get out of the country and things like that, cheering these ICE people on. And I think they believe, well, once they get rid of us, we'll be able to benefit from all the things that America has to offer us. Because, due to the fact that we are being invaded, we are being stagnated from getting all the benefits from America. So if you just get rid of the tethers and just get rid of all the black people who are undermining our society, we will have a mutual benefit in America. And this mindset, you cannot live in the delusion or the illusion of mutual benefit, thinking that you're going to benefit when that benefit leads to your subordination. After they can get rid of all our tethers and throw all us out of the country, the idea is you're going to be front and center in line to be next. But the reality of that is what Black Steel is saying is absolutely true. Donald Trump wants a white ethno state. So if you don't fit the complexion for the protection, you next. You next. After they come for us, they coming for you. This is the reason why the majority of the Supreme Court right now, they are ultra right, not white nationalists, including Clarence Thomas, by the way, including Clarence Thomas. These people say they don't want no people from no shithole countries, which is black and brown countries. We want people from European countries. You kick the black South Africans out and you invite the white South Africans to America. What do you think they're trying to do? They're trying to bolster their numbers. Because the birth rate, especially for the white male in America, is almost 0 to none. So, you know what I mean? So they trying to boost their birth rate. So the people there's this belief that after they didn't get rid of all the immigrants, all of the brown and black people, they're gonna forget about the black people because we built this country and we fought in all the wars. So we should be next in line. And I'm saying that this prime minister was correct. He said you can't live in that illusion. Because if you live in that illusion, it will only lead to your subordination. This president wants to go back. He wants to go back to 1940 or 1930. He wants to make America great again. And I hear, well, the black people saying, well, when was America great? In his mind, America is great when the Negroes in his place, or really and truly, you get them into a real conversation, they didn't exist. Let me don't get into that. I think that what Brother Bakari was telling me a long time ago, that Brother Bakari was screaming it at the top of his lungs. And I didn't want to listen to him at the time because I believed that regardless of what the president was talking about, he was restrained by law and order. He was restrained by the Constitution. He was restrained by the rules that existed within America. So he could say something from a microphone, but because of the laws, because of the Constitution, because of all this legalese, it would restrain him from doing a lot of the things he is currently doing. But you know what? Brother Bakari was right all along. The president right now is taking the Constitution and wiping his ass with it. And he is telling ICE agents, go into people's houses now. Which is, fundamentally, you basically saying the Fourth Amendment don't even exist no more. He don't even care no more. But what I also am seeing is a restructuring in world affairs where people are trying to re-navigate and renegotiate their position in the world. And I'm saying that this is a time, especially for the black man, to have his own position. Because if you don't, Dr. Amos Wilson say, if you think the white man was oppressive wait until the Chinese man or the yellow man gets in power. That's what he said, what controls the world. This was he said this like in the 80s. So I'm saying that the black man must exert himself, because this prime minister say we under a new world order. We under a new world order. And he went to the Chinese specifically and say we need to negotiate for ourselves. All the countries of the world are basically looking at the United States and say, well, they want a country unto themselves. They want a closed society. They don't want to participate with us. So I'm saying the black man have to have his own realignment in the world and say, well, what are we going to do in this repositioning in the world? Are we going to just stand to the side and get into arguments of Corey Holcomb and Anton Daniels and these frivolous, nonsensical things? Or are we going to reposition our own self in the world and exert ourselves and say, well, we matter too, and we should have a say-so in this new cake we're being reformulated? Because the truth of the matter is, unfortunately, or fortunately for some people, we are watching the implosion of an empire, a so-called first world empire. We are watching the implosion of that. And I'm wondering if the black man can stand to the side and see all these things happening and just, subordinate himself to the next group of people who can run the world, or he can decide to run part of the world himself. I just really wondering that, but I'll leave it, Koku.
Yes, sir. Good stuff. Good stuff, Juan. Good stuff for sure. I like how you brought that home. Hold those thoughts, because you mentioned him a few times. Brother Bakari has joined us. Brother Bakari, how are you this week?
I'm absolutely magnificent, my brother. What's going on, Bawana? What's going on, Black Steel? What's going on, everybody in the chat?
Yeah, man, right here. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah, I needed to hear that a couple of times. I'm glad you played it. Appreciate that. So I could get a gist and get an understanding. But I'm going to respond right quick to something that Bawana said when he said the president, the lunatic in office, is wiping his ass with the Constitution. What happened to the 25th Amendment? I'm telling you right now, we're going to be talking about what happened to the Second Amendment. We're going to be talking about what happened to you can have a well-organized militia to protect yourself from a tyrannical government. I want people to understand something. When they say they don't want liberals to have guns, they are talking about black people. They want to start, Stephen Miller said they need to start taking guns from liberals. They talking about us. Everything they're doing is pointing at us. And that guy from Canada, whoever the hell he is, like Bawana and Black Steel said, he's really talking about black folks during the Jim Crow. He's talking about, it was great during the Jim Crow era or during slavery because you integrated to boost their economy, but we did remain at the bottom, right? So now when somebody say this is the truth for FBA want to integrate, they want to delineate from everything black. Like this lady said she had a problem in a Jamaican restaurant, so she was proud to say she called ICE and said there was some illegal Jamaicans in there, and she went back 2 days later and they had been detained. But they have problems with all black people because they want to be white adjacent. If you listen to this guy, what they want America to do, okay, yeah, y'all should integrate. So you can be back at the bottom. Because when Bawana said that he believed that these FBA people, or whatever the hell they call themselves, they believe if they get rid of all of the black and brown people, all of the black people, all of the black immigrants, right? Because they don't ever mention the white immigrant. But if you get rid of all the black immigrants, they would have what America, they would be able to get what America had to offer them. How long has black immigrants been coming to this country? Were they coming here in the 20s? Were black immigrants coming here in the 30s and the 40s? There were times they wouldn't even let them in. And what America had to offer, you didn't have it then. We have decided to do the work of white people without even getting paid. white Christian nationalists. And you know, when you're in these Christian countries, there gonna always be a couple of bootlicking, bug dancing, cheat-toting house Negroes in this white Christian nation. And that's the role FBA and ADOS is taking. So that's what they want. That's what they're working toward. I find some people finding solace in what ICE is doing right now. But I asked them, I was like, if they killed a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman, what do you think they'll do to us? We can stay in the house all we want. So now they going door to door. See, everything we saying publicly we gonna do, they're attacking. Don't go on the street, don't go on the street, they're gonna kill. So now they just gonna go door to door. You know, they just got 2 teenage African-American kids last week, picked them up. They threw the flash grenade under this woman car with her 6 kids in there, African-American. We're gonna have to do something, and we're gonna have to take care of ourselves. You know, I'm a believer in right to bear arms. I'm believing in getting the militia, but that's it, because our fool around to go to talking about that. But that's good. Thanks for letting me speak. I yield the mic.
No problem, Brother Bakari. Trigger Happy in the chat says, I gotta admit the white nationalists did a great job creating the FBA. It's a good strategy because Pan-Africanism keeps the black birth rate up. FBA makes it go lower. Is there any other last thoughts you guys have on this prompt?
I would say anybody who thinks that Black Americans are going to get some sort of benefit as soon as we get the immigrants out has a complete pathological rejection of history, as Dr. Bobby E. Wright would say. This is something that is you can't be reading the room. You can't study. This is why he said menticide is the biggest threat, because you can't open up or know anything about history and think that white people are going to treat us right just as soon as they learn how to. It's a crazy statement just on its face. That means you have to ignore literally centuries. And the thing is, when immigrants were coming in, and at the end of the 19th century, they had those immigrants coming from Ireland and Italy and Eastern Europe and so on and so forth, right? Those white immigrants came in the country, and then they were elevated over the Black people who had been here since the quote unquote foundation, right? So Black people who have been here since before the founding of the United States have always been passed over for new immigrant groups coming in, because those immigrant groups could be assimilated into whiteness. And this is so funny. We talked about how, Black Americans have always fought. They've fought in every war this country has fought. But yet people forget that there was this point in American history where German POWs, literally Nazi German POWs, were treated better than Black soldiers who fought for this country. They made the Black soldiers go into the back, and the German soldiers were able to eat, who had been captured, were able to eat in the restaurants, even though they were prisoners of war who had killed Americans. So the idea that they're going to recognize us and these immigrant groups are being put over in front of us is just a ridiculous statement. It really, truly is. You can't know anything about history. You got to be in complete denial. There's nothing coming for you but more subjugation. It's kind of sad at this point, which is why I do believe this whole thing is just really a psyop and cooked up by the powers that be, because you can't be this stupid. Or maybe you can. I don't know. People's stupidity always surprises me.
So Black Steel, what you're saying is, before African immigrants started coming here, these foundational people were still at the bottom. I know that's not what you're saying. Now, I agree with your point. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And I think that you can't be. You probably had to fall asleep in class to not know this, or maybe you didn't bother to learn this lesson. There's never been a point where if we get rid of the Spanish-speaking people, or we other people that we'll be okay. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we was on point. Go ahead.
Sister Cheryl in the chat asked a question on the screen. At this point, do y'all think that these Western nations can afford to lose all of their non-white population? Like, does that sound like it makes economic sense? Does anyone want to address that?
I don't think they can afford to lose all of their non-white population, but I believe they think they can limit how much a non-white population they have. No, they don't want to lose it all. No, they don't want to lose it all because they want to keep some people in a certain position, but they do want to limit it. These white Christian nationalists, they really truly want to limit it, where they don't want many of us here. And that's what happened with the so-called brown people, the Latinos. Too many of them coming here for their liking because they don't want nobody to be close to them in numbers or outnumber them. They don't want any of that. So, and that's why they can find some of us. I ain't gonna say some of us. That's why they can find some black people. Just because they black, they ain't some of us. That's my opinion. But that's why they can find a person like the leader of the FBA and the ADOS, find people like them to get people to go and scream and follow, because that's really truly what they want. Numbers limited. Numbers limited. They want us trapped here. Go ahead.
Yeah, to ask that question is to have the notion that white supremacy, or this delusion of white supremacy, because it's a delusion, is logical and reasonable. Some of these white, think about it now. The majority of the white folks in America elected a felon who was accused and convicted. Well, he was charged of rape, and I think he had rape charges on him, found civilly liable. He is a man. He's a gangster. He don't like black people. I mean, these are things are recorded. He's a PDF with Jeffrey Epstein, and knowing all of that, they still chose to elect him. And you ask them, right? They say, "Oh, he's just a strong president." You have to remove the idea of reason out of your brain, bro. You have to remove reason out of your brain. These people just want to feel. As long as you could make them feel good, you could rob their pockets. You could rip them right off. Just give them the illusion that they are the best and the brightest, and they should be in certain places of authority and power just based off of whiteness alone. So if you think of it on that level, this whole notion of whites, it has no reason to it. So for you to believe that they wouldn't do it, these people will cut off their nose to spite their faces. If the European man in America knows that he can't rule and control the world as he been doing, he may blow it up. You know what I mean? He might blow it up. He's like, well, I can't have it. No one can have it. These are the kind of notions that is being wrangling in these people's heads. The president is a supreme narcissist. You know, he is not built off of reason and logic. He ain't gonna look at things like that, and he will get rid of you. He will get rid of you. He'll cut off his nose to spite his face, just to live in a delusion of we are white ethno state and we are the best and the brightest. I want you to consider that. Don't think that you are non-replaceable or non-removable, or they can't never get rid of us because of all our gifts and talents. Ask the Jews in Germany. The Jews in Germany was some of the most educated, sophisticated group of people within Germany at the time of Hitler. And what did he try to do? He tried to get rid of all of them. He didn't consider the fact, well, these guys are helping our economy. These guys are great bankers. These guys are running our corporations and things that our nation. No. They got scapegoated, and if it wasn't for the intervening armies of Russia and the United States and other people, he would have eventually gotten rid of all of it. It doesn't matter their talents and gift and what they can provide for the economy. They'll find other people to do it. Just consider that. Just consider that. I'll leave it there, Coco.
There's a really good quote by there's a really good quote by President Lyndon B. Johnson. He says, if you could tell the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you picking his pocket. In fact, he'll empty his pockets for you. I'm paraphrasing. But for a lot of white people in America, whiteness is all they have, right? They don't mind cutting off they don't mind losing a big toe if a black person can lose a foot. They don't mind hurting themselves. And that's where the pathology comes in, because there's no reasoning with these people. Look at the economy of the United States. Is it doing better by all the deportations they're doing? As a matter of fact, a lot of the people who's building the houses got kicked out of the United. Yeah, people who were working on the construction sites, picking the fruit. Like, the construction sites are empty, and the fruit is rotting in the fields in some places in Florida, because all the immigrants are scared to go to work. And then, they're complaining about high prices. The price is going to get higher because nobody's building houses, nobody's picking food. But they don't mind, because they can feel better. They can see some poor person get kicked out of the country or get shot and killed. It's completely pathological. There's no understanding this. Only thing we can do is fight it.
With that, Sister Cheryl has joined us. How are you this week, Sister Cheryl?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hey, Buana. How are you?
Hey, I'm hanging in there, Amma. Thank you for asking, by the way. I'm hanging in there.
Yeah. Well, condolences to you, and I hope everything is good and you're well. But yeah, oh man, I forgot what I was gonna say. So yeah, I think Trigger Happy brought up a good point in the chat. He said that, like, I don't think, because I know people are like really like mad and upset with FBA, and I think they're mad for the right reasons, because the FBA don't realize that they're being used. They don't realize that they're being used to further destabilize the black world. And I say that, and it sounds like I'm putting a lot of pressure on FBA, but when people look at black people, they look at black people in America first, because it's America, because America has such a strong hold, like a strong, there's such a force to be reckoned with around the world. So when people look at that, and and the first thing they see is they make it a point, like white media makes it a point to put FBA on center stage. They have no problem with it, because it just goes right along with their plans of further destabilization of the black world. And then, let me get back to what I was going to say about what Trigger Happy said. He said something about like the mulattification of, or the mulattification of, I guess they're trying to mulattify the black world. I think certain parts of South America have done that. They've adopted that. I think, like me and my husband talk about this all the time, and that's definitely what they're pushing towards, is to mulattify us. That's why you see all these commercials with the crazy looking white guy and the black woman, and it's just everywhere. Like, you cannot even like go anywhere without seeing it. They're going to keep doing that even with the Trump administration. In terms of, I know people are upset with FBA saying, they're next, because they're taking out all the black immigrants and they're next. But I think, and I don't think this is something that FBA should be proud of, but I think FBA is instrumental in turning and mulattifying, and they're doing it in other places too. Like they're doing the Caribbean and they're doing it in Africa, but the difference is these places are majority black, and so even if they wanted to do that, it would be very difficult. It's very difficult to try to turn Jamaica all mulatto. Like, I mean, I'm sure they'll try, but the people who that would work with best at this point right now is the black population in America. And you see that a lot. You see that a lot on the military bases. Like that's what they're going to move towards. I think that's more what black people in general in America have to be concerned about, and not so much this ICE thing, right? That's they know who they want to get rid of already with ICE. But the other half that they're not worried about, like they're not going after certain immigrants. They're going after certain people who don't have their right now. That's tier one. They're just going after certain people who don't have their papers and this, that, and the third. Then because they're trying to decide. They're trying to figure out how they're going to do what South America did in certain places. So they're in the process of trying to figure that out. But are they going to just throw everybody away to ICE? I don't think so. I think they have a more cynical plan. So
that mulattoism, that mulatto creation is a very specific, since you mentioned it, is a very specific mulattoing that they're trying to do too. It's specifically white men, black women. In fact, I saw a little reel the other day. I guess it's been going around. Some white guys breaking down film, and they were saying how a black guy, a black man can't ever get a white woman in the film. He said Will Smith could get a Latina, but he ain't getting no white woman in the film. I thought that was very interesting that they're pushing for this very specific mulatto creation.
That's so funny you said that, Toku, because Will Smith was with what's her name, the white woman Margot Robbie in that movie Focus, to the point where there was rumors about him messing around behind his wife with the girl. They were so close on the set. So I don't know how true that is.
Yeah, that's true. He was in that film. I don't know how many people saw that film, as an aside note, but for the most part, you don't. Is that specific? It's not a black guy breeding their woman. It's the other way around. If there's no last thoughts on this problem, man.
Coco, I have a quick question for Amma. In terms of mulattoization, I have a question for her, because I know the sisters. I hear, I'm on these YouTube streets sometimes, not always, but sometimes, and I hear the sisters saying that the reason why they choose to date white males is because of resources. They can take care of you better. But what I've not heard is, yes, women are attracted to power, women are attracted to resources, but do black sisters also acknowledge that the highest numbers of PDFs, PDFs is white men? So it's like your child is more apple inclined to get messed with by these white males. By these white, do the sisters consider that as well when they trying to factor in, oh, this white guy can take care of me? Yeah, but he might mess with your daughter too. So do the sisters consider that in these kinds of mulattoization and these dialogues? Just curious question.
I don't even think they're thinking that far. I think they're just thinking like a lot of women in this country it's fantasy. It's like they're into this Bridgerton fantasy where black women are going to get to ride off, on their white horse with their white man. I think it's more that. I don't even think they're thinking about that for real. I think like when people get into the fantasy, they let's say like a black woman actually starts dating or being with a white man, but it's not my white man. It becomes like that. It's their full fantasy. It's total delusion. So I mean, and then it's expounded on by the movies and the TV shows on Netflix. So that's all it really is. It's really just propaganda control of, it's that stuff.
I don't think they really care. If I'm honest with you, I don't think they really think that deep, right? You got to remember, the white man has the greatest PR in history, man. White men went around raping, pillaging, murdering on every inhabited landmass, and yet after all that, they're still seen as the pinnacle of manhood. And it's not just black women. It's not even particularly black women, because even though we talk a lot about it, the highest rate of interracial relationships in the U.S. is an Asian female and a white male. Asian women are choosing up on the white dudes, and even though in reality, Asian men make more money than white men in general. So if it was just about resources, it was just about status, Asian men would date Asian women. But it's more than just that. So even though you have a race of men who literally have committed every type of atrocity everywhere, they're still seen as, let me get me a white man. Let me get me a white dude, because my life would be better because they got this, they got that. It's ridiculous when you think about it on the face of it.
Trigger Happy in the chat says they won't consider it when the image of white men is white Jesus or Prince Charming. Goes on to say if the truth was told about them, they probably won't be able to compete with other cultural groups of men. So it's a good use of imagery and propaganda. Cheryl in the chat says it's white Bridgerton fantasy. They're not even thinking about pedos. All right. With that said, man, good discussion, everyone. Thanks you guys for joining the panel. Much better with a few friends than just me sitting here talking, right? Let's go to Shooter Breeze topic number 3, man. Shooter Breeze topic number 3 says Zionism in Brazil aids in narco evangelism, persecuting Candomblé. This comes with 2 attachments. Let's see if I could share this with you guys. No, hold on, I gotta do it again. Okay, so this goes to, okay. So make sure you guys can see my screen as well. There we go. So I'm going to play the first video, followed by the second, and then we'll have the full discussion.
In the north of Rio, this colonial house is a place of worship for Umbanda, an Afro-Brazilian religion. On Saturday morning, Fernanda Franco, the temple's religious leader, gathered her followers to assess the damage.
We're going to put everything we want to keep in front of a house, so we'll be organized when Valori arrives.
A few days earlier, this place of worship was invaded and ransacked.
This is our sacred space, which has been completely destroyed. These are objects sacred to the Eshu deity, who has been demonized even though he has nothing to do with the devil. That's why this place was destroyed the most in the temple. There's nothing left here.
For her, this is not a simple act of vandalism because it's motivated by religious intolerance. The culprits left behind several objects as though it were their signature.
This is one of the 2 Bibles that was left here. It means that we're not welcome here, that they want to silence us, extinguish our history, everything we believe in. It's a message.
To protect her followers, she's decided to leave the premises. According to the Ministry of Human Rights, Brazil recorded an increase of almost 70% in cases of religious intolerance in 2024 compared to the year before. The main victims were religions of African origin, such as Umbanda and Candomblé. According to studies, the main culprits are evangelical Christians.
At least 60% of my congregation need to be discreet about their religious choice for fear of reprisals at work, because their boss is evangelical, or even within their own home. Some of my followers have evangelical parents who are unaware that their children practice Umbanda.
Intolerance is fueled by more aggressive branches of evangelical Christianity known as Pentecostal and Neo-Pentecostal churches. Their numbers have exploded in Brazil in recent years. There were 8 times more of them in 2021 than at the end of the 1990s. For Márcio de Jogum, a priest from the Afro-Brazilian religion Candomblé, the phenomenon is taking on the aspect of a holy war.
Since the 70s and 80s, neo-Pentecostal groups have become the protagonists of attacks and violence. It's a form of modern crusade. There is a desire to occupy a territory, as happened in the Middle Ages. There is a struggle for power, as in the Middle Ages. And there is an economic dispute.
Over the last 10 years or so, the priest has received many calls from his faithful who are being persecuted.
Hello, how are you doing?
Between 2008 and 2013, this man on the phone was threatened by the militia, the Rio Mafia. Even today, he prefers to remain anonymous for fear of reprisals.
Some of my faithful were threatened with large caliber weapons, which looked like AK-47 rifles, outside our place of worship. The militiamen came to threaten us during a service. They were armed and told us that we had a week to leave the premises.
In your opinion, did the fundamentalist evangelicals in the region rely on the power of criminals to impose their religious domination?
Yes, that's exactly what they were doing through the church.
Which church?
It was a cell of the Universal Church.
What this man is describing is the new alliance between organized crime and certain evangelical Christians that's been sowing terror in Rio for the last 15 years. In these videos from 2017, religious leaders are forced to destroy their temples by evangelical traffickers.
Se eu pegar de novo, ou tentar construir esse caralho de novo, eu vou matar.
Nicknamed narco-Pentecostalism, this alliance between organized crime and evangelical Christianity has intensified in the favela complex of Israel, named after the Holy Land. One of Rio's most dangerous territories, it's dominated by the so-called Army of the Living God. Criminals are under the influence of Álvaro Malaquias Santa Rosa, a drug baron who's converted to religion and says he takes his orders from God in his war against enemy factions and the police. He's expelled all practitioners of Afro-Brazilian religions and is the subject of 10 arrest warrants, including for homicide and torture. Victims seldom seek help from this specialized police station set up in Rio in 2018 to receive and investigate complaints.
I wouldn't say that it's more difficult for these victims to lodge a complaint, but there are far fewer complaints, perhaps because the victims are afraid. This doesn't just concern people from this type of locality, but the whole state of Rio, the whole country. People also don't file complaints because they don't understand what's going on. They think it's not a crime, or that there won't be any punishment anyway.
In March, during a police operation, the emblem of the Israel complex, a giant Star of David at the top of the favela, was removed. It's a symbolic action against evangelical drug trafficking, but far from sufficient to combat the religious intolerance that continues to spread throughout society.
This is a Candomblé ritual, a religion brought to Brazil by African slaves. It survived centuries of persecution and discrimination before gaining acceptance. But as October's presidential election approaches, many of its followers feel like they've become targets in a holy war.
Hostilities increase when you mix politics with religion. Our temples have been attacked by the growing number of radical evangelical Christians. It's a battle for souls, for power, and for votes.
Protestant Christian evangelicals are Brazil's fastest growing religious group. They have become a strong force in politics and the media. The evangelicals include President Jair Bolsonaro's wife, Michele, and say they're defending the Bible and traditional family values.
Bolsonaro was chosen by God.
Followers of Afro-Brazilian faiths say the evangelicals are also driving a culture of intolerance as the election approaches. The First Lady shared this video on social media. It shows Bolsonaro's main adversary, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, being blessed by a priestess and compares him to a devil worshiper. Last year, Brazilian authorities received 586 complaints of religious intolerance, 141% more than in 2020. In 9 out of 10 cases, the targets were followers of Afro-Brazilian religions. This woman was forced at gunpoint to destroy her temple. Edson is a Candomblé practitioner. He makes his living as an Uber driver, catering specially to people who feel oppressed because of their faith.
I know how my passengers feel because I've been there. I've had Uber riders cancel the ride when they saw me dressed in my ceremonial clothes. In the bus, people make you uncomfortable by inching away from you.
He drives fellow Candomblé faithful to their ceremonies and shows them sanctuaries like this park where they can feel safe.
Until recently, it was common to find offerings to spiritual entities of the Afro-Brazilian religions like this one on the crossroads or on beaches of Rio de Janeiro and other urban cities. This one has food and it has perfume and candles. But every time more, the followers of these religions are going to secluded places like this forest because they're afraid they'll be persecuted or that their offerings will be destroyed.
Meanwhile, followers of Afro-Brazilian religions continue to beat their drums and call on their saints, asking for protection and peace. Monica Yanakiev, Al Jazeera, Rio de Janeiro.
Let's bring in Graziella Testa. She's a professor for the School of Public Policy and Government at the Getulio Vargas Foundation. And she joins us via Skype from Brasilia. Thanks very much for being with us. Well, why does this fear exist and this persecution of these Afro-Brazilian religions? Why does it exist in Brazil?
Yes. Hi, Laura. Thank you for the invite. The Brazilians, the Afro-Brazilians have actually been mischaracterized as witchcraft and related to some things that are not true, especially by some evangelicals and some churches in particular. So we are a very racist country. We have this structural racism that is a important characteristic of our culture. And one of the parts of this racism is the prejudice against the practitioners of Umbanda, Candomblé, and other religions related to Afro-Americans that came with the Afro-Americans that came to Brazil to work as slaves. So we are a country that based its colonization on slavery work. And we never had an effective policy to include those citizens in society after the slavery was abolished in the late 800s.
And have you noticed this intolerance, this level of intolerance rising under Jair Bolsonaro?
It has risen because minorities in general are being mistreated and are not treated as they should. That they are dignity, they deserve rights, and they must be protected. Jair Bolsonaro is deeply related to the evangelical community, and the evangelical community is very diverse itself. It's not that everyone has prejudice against the Afro-descendants, but Jair Bolsonaro has it's based on this religion, and it has been growing because of it. So he's not afraid of saying bad things and prejudice things against this population.
I mean, Brazil is still a predominantly Catholic country, but we have seen this rise in evangelicalism in politics and in sport. Why does it appeal to so many people?
So we are mostly Catholics, but evangelicals tend to vote because of their religion. So they are a strong political community as a religion. They have been rising because they, like 30 or 40 years ago, they started this important work in the poor areas of Brazil, and they actually came in places that the state could not come. And they provided services such as provide food to those who didn't have food in those places. They provided some kind of culture in places that didn't exist. And they just occupied the place that should be a state place. And now they are very big, they are strong, and some of them are centralized and they are political related to some candidates.
Very interesting, man. For me, first, we still going through this type of shit in 2026? Like, that's amazing to me. I mean, I get why, because of religion's connection to influence and economics and all that, but we still going through this persecution shit. The Crusades. Secondly, narco evangelism. Narco evangelism. That's an interesting concept. But anyway, I digress. Let me throw it right to the panel. Let me see. Who should I go with here first, man? Let me go with Sister Cheryl. Sister Cheryl, what say you?
Yeah. So I guess I didn't realize, like, when they say Brazil is the blackest out of all of the, I guess, South American nations, I guess I was just looking for the black people. Like, maybe it's just to my untrained eye. I was just searching for that. But I'm not normally I've never been to Brazil, so I'm sure, I know they do have a population. They practice Candomblé. They practice a lot of the Yoruba spiritual systems. So yeah, I do understand that. I was just kind of, for myself, I was just looking, and I was squinting real hard. I was trying to find where the black people, and I see some right now. I see them right there in the picture. So that's interesting. It's very interesting how, the evangelists, I guess, and they separate. I noticed how they separate how the evangelists treat them. Did they do that versus how the Catholics treat them? I guess the evangelists have less of a tolerance for their practice. I'm assuming that. But I guess what I was thinking about when I was looking at that is how the evangelism, like, for people who are Catholic in the United States, like Catholic and all of that, like how evangelism shows itself amongst the Christian population in the United States. And like, you can see, like, they persecute and they put down Candomblé, and a lot of the African spiritual systems is the same way I find a lot of my family members put down, like, anything African. It's kind of, it's all the same. And sometimes in the States, I'm not sure if they do this in Brazil, but sometimes in the States, Black people like to separate the actions of Christians from Christ itself. They love to do that because it gives them it makes them feel good about actually practicing it, it makes them feel, well, I can still practice it because I don't practice that type of Christianity. I practice this type. So therefore it's okay. And I think when you see stuff like this, and to a lesser degree in the United States, you might not see black, people in the United States killing people for practicing Candomblé, or, ransacking their house or anything. But it still shows up in their behavior, and that's just as bad. And so, is that my baby? Oh no. Okay. Sorry. So I just find it interesting how, like, this is the best example of how you cannot separate, like, you can't separate the evangelism from, like, the Christianity. Like, you have some Christians that, yeah, maybe you can make the argument that some are more violent than the others, but it's embedded in Christianity. That's what Christianity is. And I think black people really, we when we see stuff like this, like, we really don't have an understanding of what Christianity is. I'll just leave it there.
Appreciate that, Sister Cheryl. Let's have from Brother Bakari next. Brother Bakari, let's see.
Okay, excuse me. Didn't they say something about a cartel or whatever? The narcos is attacking. But that's what this world has been, in all honesty. Go back to the beginning. It didn't make a difference what it was. People went to war. European people went to war. Europeans and Arabs went to war over religion. That caused most of damn near all the wars throughout history. Is somebody saying their God is greater than your God. Because somebody got the one almighty God, and I'm quite sure people practicing African spirituality have multiple gods, right? So throughout the history of this world, that's what it's been. And now the way our people have been subjugated in this part of the world. Now, they really don't want you to know anything about Africa. That's why they took your name, they took your language, they strip you of your culture, as much of the culture as they could. We still walk around with our last name, still mean ownership. So they don't want you to have anything African. I think they see it as a threat, but at the same time, they also see it as the group of people that stop fighting. We can do this to them, and they're not fighting back no more. We're just trying to get along. Why can't we, like Rodney King said, why can't we all just get along? But for them to be attacking, that's their history. Let's fight over gods, and we're not going to let them. They're afraid their gods, the African gods, might start to give us power. So we're going to have to get rid of the people that's summoning the African gods to come help them. And on that, I hear the mic.
That quote, why can't we all just get along, is one of the weakest statements in the history of all niggerdom. Like, why can't we all just get along? I remember that so vividly. And even then, I was a young fellow, but even then I was like, what? Anyway, Trigger Happy in the chat says you can only protect African spirituality with unity. But unfortunately, when you bring the idea up, people push back and say they want their ethnic spirituality separate from others. Provide triggers. I saw the second part of a comment, but for some reason I don't see the first part of the comment. But she says the documentary highlights how, with the aid of powerful pastors like Silas Malafia, the line between church and state has blurred, impacting the democracy. With that said, man, let me hear from Black Steel next on this. Black Steel would say it.
If you would have put narco evangelicalism on my bingo card for 2023. Who had that? Who had narco evangelism on their bingo card for 2026? Because I know I didn't. I'm completely flabbergasted at this very idea of these religious, ultra-religious drug traffickers. Like, I don't think Jesus would be okay with you, spreading poison to the population and selling drugs, right? But yet y'all want to be so hyper, conservative when it comes to religion. There's a saying, there's no hate like Christian love, right? There's no hate like Christian love. When you fall outside of the grace, there's no level of hatred that's not too much for you, right? And this is what Christianity has always done. In the Bible, Jesus talks about, and he sent his disciples out to spread the gospel, and they reject you. You're supposed to just shake the dust from your feet and just move on, right? Kick the dust from your feet, walk away, everything's cool. That's never happened in the history of anything. Even when you study how early Christianity in the Roman Empire, right? So Christianity starts off as a small persecuted religious sect in the Roman Empire. Once it becomes adopted by the state, then there's no longer any coexistence. So prior to the ascension of Christianity in ancient Rome, there were many different religions that existed within the empire. You had the cult of Isis, which was very big in ancient Rome. You had things like, they had the ancient Roman gods and the Greek gods and so on and so forth. You even had Judaism that existed within the Roman Empire. And everybody tended to kind of do their own thing as long as you pay tribute to the emperor. Once the Christians showed up, nah, we're not doing that. So they began the large-scale eradication of anything but their religion. So you see that same pattern. It's not enough that 99% of people in Brazil are Catholic. You gotta have that 1%, which is they don't even evangelize. They're not trying to convert people to their faith. They just want it gone. So this is a problem. I just never heard those words put together in a sentence. Narco evangelism. It's crazy. I don't know what laws Brazil has with freedom of religion. I'm assuming they're not anything close to what exists in the United States, right? Because they've had situations in the US where there have been problems with people practicing Santeria in the United States to the point it got to the Supreme Court, to where they found it was the laws that were passed in some area in Florida were in violation of the First Amendment because it prohibited animal sacrifice. So I don't think the laws are in place. But then again, these people don't care about the law or what it says. I don't believe these, they want to make it seem like by practicing these traditional African religions and whatnot, which to the point, this is a religion that was brought over from Africa, right? But there are some elements of Catholicism within that religion. So the very fact that they still have some elements of, the belief from Africa is too much for them. And it's just crazy to me that they're so full of hate. They're willing to attack these people and kill these people and threaten them. But there's literally nothing that surprises me anymore. Although I will have said narco evangelism did catch me off guard. The Christians have been having a rough time, man. Christians have been this past couple of years. The evangelicals have been showing their ass. They've dropped the complete thing about brotherly love and so on and so forth. They've just dropped that from the repertoire. They don't even pretend anymore. They're just like full on butt naked in your face with it. And I guess I respect the honesty, but at the same time, it's like, what are we doing right now? You're not gonna get people to join your faith by killing them or attacking them. But everybody can see the type of beliefs that you guys are about. So what is the end goal here? What are you trying to accomplish? Whatever you're trying to accomplish, you're going to fail because I don't know. People aren't going to be flocking to join your church, because you attacked their grandma because she had a shrine or something like that. And this is the war against African religion has been going on forever. That's why I'm of two minds many times when it comes to this certain situation. Because on one hand, I understand how people are devoted to their beliefs. And I try to be respectful of other people's belief systems, even if I don't hold to it myself, right? I feel like, people live their life and should be able to practice what they believe and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, these religions are hostile, not just to African people. These religions are hostile to us. How can you coexist with a hostile alien religion that is hell-bent on your subjugation? We got to deal with this because it's a problem. It's a big problem. And I don't think that people really understand how big of a problem it is, to where, African people can't even coexist. These people aren't doing anything to anybody. And again, Bolsonaro's in prison now. So I know it's maybe been from a while ago. So I'm hoping that maybe the situation has improved somewhat since he is locked up. So maybe things have gotten better for the people that are going through it right now. So those are my thoughts, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how eventually the facade always goes away, and they give you that naked truth, man. This ties into that topic we had earlier with the guy from Canada and what he was saying about basically saying closing ranks, right? This is more of that. The Christian church doesn't even talk about brotherly love no more. I gotta agree with Black Steel on that one. I even forgot that was a concept until Black Steel mentioned it just now. They don't even deal in it no more. And that's all there is to deal in when I was a kid coming up. They don't even, they don't even deal with it no more. And Sister Cheryl said, you gotta kind of like that for those who are amongst the initiated, the aware. You have to kind of like that. It's just a shame that not enough of us are usually aware. Our ears don't perk up when we hear and see this shit. Anyway, Bonnie, you've seen and heard everything everyone else had to say. What say you to all of it?
Yeah, Coco. I find it interesting that this lady who was doing the interview, she calling 80 million people a minority, and the Black Brazilians buy into that nonsense. 80 million people in any situation can never be a minority. It's a psychological term. It's a psychological term to put you in a subordinate position and state. And I think that the numbers of Black people in Brazil need to be more revolutionary. They need to grow a level of Black consciousness to believe that they could be dominant as well. They need to get together, just as the Black Americans do, in terms of that revolutionary vigor. And they need to have a Bible. Stop playing that game. Stop playing that game because you 80 million strong. And people will take advantage of you as long as you allow them to. As long as you allow them to. Stop playing that game. What's funny is, by the way, let me also say the whole narco evangelism, that is a thing in South America, in particular Mexico. They call them what do they call them? Santos de las Muertes. The saints of the dead. They go and pray to these deities before committing whatever drug acts they need to commit in Mexico. So it's big in South America. I don't know, maybe that's the culture, that's their thing, but they have that in the South American countries. But it's funny. What's funny is this Bolsonaro guy, his Jesus go and give him a 27-year sentence. And plus, what's interesting too is he gave him skin cancer. He gave him skin cancer. The very same thing he hate and loathe with playing racial politics with against these Black people. Jesus and whoever gave him skin cancer. The very same thing. You mess with the African gods, maybe that's the end result. Who knows? Who knows? I find that to be very strange. But I think that the Black Brazilians, who are 80 million strong, they need to develop a bit of a Black consciousness and not just not have it no more. You know, you need a bunch of Brother Bakaris down there. If you get a weapon, we'll get a bigger weapon. How about that? You know, and if we can't live peacefully and we can't share resources, then nobody will have it. How about that? How about that? You need to hear. They need to hear how bigger, stronger voices within the Black collective in Brazil, and stop playing that minority game. That's a game. That's a psychological game. Because 80 million people could never be a minority. It could never be a minority. If 80 million people decide to do one particular thing, their voices will be severely felt. So I would just encourage the Brazilians, the Black Brazilians, to not move like that. You need to move stronger than how you have been moving, and just not have it. People will take advantage of you as long as you allow them to. That's what I have discovered in this world, but I'll leave it there, Coco.
Yeah, good stuff. In the chat, Triggers, Happy says they need to stop swirling too. If there's no last thoughts on this,
I think really quickly, Coco, it depends on your population, right? 80 million people in most places in the world, maybe it's not a minority, but you go somewhere like China, there's 1 billion people. 80 million is nothing. So it really just depends on the population of the country. But I understand your point. The Afro-Brazilian population, Brazil was the destination of the majority of Africans who were enslaved via the transatlantic slave trade. Brazil and the Caribbean. So for all FBA's bluster, not even 10% of those who were transported via the slave trade came through British North America. The overwhelming majority of them went to the sugar plantations in the Caribbean, Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, places like that, and Brazil. So that's kind of what when they say the blackest country. But again, the Portuguese view of racial mixing was not that of British North America. The British, especially in the United States, they had their 1-drop rule. You had 1 drop of black blood, you were still black. So there was no fucking your way out of slavery, especially if you had a black mother, you couldn't do that. Whereas in Brazil, in certain cases, the way you were treated was dependent on your black, the amount of black blood in your history. That's why people always say race is a social construct, because your racial background is dependent on the society in which you lived in. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I too thought to comment on that minority thing from Buana, but I got the, like you, Black Steel, I got the spirit of what he was trying to say. I hope everyone out there got it as well. Should read topic number 4 tonight. It says timeout boxes. This is a prime example of the school to prison pipeline. This comes with a link that's going to take us to Instagram. StreamYard needs to fix this. I gotta do it again. Instagram. Yeah, so this takes us to Instagram. Make sure you guys can see my screen. All right, it should be coming up now. Yeah, so this takes us to Instagram. We'll watch it maybe twice if need be. This is from Pan-African Homeschool Network.
Parents in upstate New York are outraged. A school investigation underway after allegations came out that staff were using wooden timeout boxes built for special needs students. These boxes, lined with a padded mat, were allegedly being used as a behavioral calming measure. Salmon River School District board directors closed campus last week after launching an investigation. The superintendent of schools was placed on at-home duties, and other staff have been placed on administrative leave pending further notice. The claims are making national headlines and garnering the attention of New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Joining me now is former Salmon River School Board member Chrissy Jacobs. Ms. Jacobs, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sego.
I don't have to tell you that this was definitely a topic of conversation here in the newsroom. When we saw this story, we heard about it, we were excited to speak with you. Chrissy, you also posted on.
Well, I don't like the word timeout boxes because it minimizes the damage and the trauma that our families have experienced. I'm going to call them what they are: child-size shoes, child-size holes. Got a hold of these images because a concerned community member forwarded them to me who worked in the school and was resigning. So you have full permission to use them. We need all the help we can get. We've spent the last couple of decades silenced by the school district and the New York State Department of Education when it comes to treatment of children in upstate New York.
And Ms. Jacob, because it should not matter whether or not I have a child in that classroom or not, I would think that any parent would be outraged. The person who forwarded the photos to you, did they see it actually a child inside at any time, or are they saying this is something they had planned to do with those boxes?
No, so those boxes were specifically built with one student in mind, according to Principal Allison Benedict. We have come to find out from sources within the school district and within the St. Regis Mohawk School that Fromm, who was a behavioral specialist that the district brought in, was pressuring staff to use these boxes. This is one of 3 within the Salmon River School District. And they were also being pressured to use closets or bookshelves to corral children.
How do you believe something like this could happen? Even as I look at this, and I had a conversation with my producer, someone discussed it, someone planned it, someone put it in, and no one within all of these adults thought this was a bad idea?
I think what we're seeing is a direct relation to what happens when you dehumanize any population or demographic of people. Eventually, we just become statistics on a paper for funding.
Ms. Jacobs, when you see this and you've raised the attention with us, you're speaking with us now, what is it that you hope happens? Ms. Jacobs, I want to thank you again for joining us. That was Chrissy Jacobs, who brought to our attention here at News Nation these boxes, these images that you see on your screen. I had called them a timeout box, and she corrected me by saying, I don't want to call them that. I want to call them what they are, that these are boxes holding children, and it's unacceptable. We will, of course, continue to follow this story as it develops. And we're also, we have a request out to the Governor Kathy Hochul, to get her responses. Parents and
Yeah, sorry about that. My is glitching a little bit here. So that was the video. Hold on a second. My computer is acting up. That was the video. I also need to read this. Kind of difficult to read. It says, let's be clear. These are not timeout boxes. This is solitary confinement, and its lasting, damaging psychological effects are well documented. This is a blatant manifestation of the school-to-prison pipeline. Systems and practices that push children, especially Black, Indigenous, disabled, and I'm guessing low-income students, out of schools and into the criminal legal system instead of supporting their learning and behavior. This pipeline includes the criminalization of normal childhood behavior, zero tolerance policies, police presence in schools, and exclusion from education through suspension and expulsion. It mirrors older systems of social control where institutions discipline rather than nurture Black youth. We see the same pattern today as excessive resources are poured into military and defense spending, while the U.S. Department of Education is simultaneously dismantled. Between the epidemic of school shootings, the concealment of the Epstein files, and support for the genocide in Gaza, America is arguably the most child-hating society on earth. Only a disconnected, self-hating people will allow their children to be subjected to this level of horror and degradation. Solutions. How do we disrupt this pipeline? We must invest in alternative and culturally responsive education models. Pan-African education not only affirms Black identity, culture, and genius, but centers African and diasporic our story as foundational, not supplemental, while teaching children to interpret power structures rather than internalize blame. This type of education is imperative to our very survival as African people. We must prioritize equipping our children with a knowledge of self. For those who find homeschooling challenging, there are African-centered schools and co-ops, as well as virtual online schools available for enrollment. For a free school directory, please visit TPT Store, link in the bio. So you guys could navigate to this page on Instagram, and you guys can check out the link in the bio. Homeschooling. This was a very important, it's still a very important topic for me too. This was huge to me a couple years ago when I recognized that it really is the education. By the time you start to try to work with adults, you're too late, unfortunately. It's very hard to change. It's very hard to fix a broken thing, but if you can get to that thing early on and give it the attributes that you want, then you stand a chance. And Pan-African, African-centered schooling is super important, and this is an example of why. These guys are straight up throwing your children into solitary confinement within school. The school system, if you're listening to this and you're not in America to see it, particularly in like places like New York and stuff, if you're not here to see it, you wouldn't know. But a lot of these schools are built like prisons. Heavy gates on the windows and all kind of shit. Like they're built like prisons. The whole design of the school. See, where I come from, we didn't have a cafeteria, right? These guys have a cafeteria and a setup, a gym and a setup in one building that resembles prison, man. That resembles prison. I work at a college that's next door to a high school. If I'm not mistaken, I think Oni went to that school, so I'm not going to call the name of the school, but you walk past this thing and you look at it, it looks like a prison. Anyway, I digress. Let me start with Buana on this one. Let me mix it up. Buana, what say you?
Cool. I see this two ways. Okay, I see this two ways because Black Steel have a favorite saying, right? Black Steel is say fuck them kids. He say fuck them kids. And my lady is a primary school teacher, so I understand the frustration because I get to hear it all the goddamn time. But this is extreme, man. This extreme. You gotta be so frustrated that you're putting the child into a hot box. You remember the movie The Django when they used to put the slaves, the unruly slaves, into the hot box? This is the hot box. This is the hot box. I think that there should be a there should be a better way to maybe discipline a child and go about doing these things. Because if you put my child in the hot box, I could put you in the hot box. You know, so to avoid being arrested and sent to prison, because it is confinement. It's unlawful confinement. You're putting someone in a position where, what they call it, I forget the legal term for it. I can't remember it right now. It don't ain't on the top of my head. But you can't do that. That's highly illegal. I don't see how a school system would permit this to happen. I really don't see that. I don't see the. I think there must be a better way to where you could satisfy the teacher's end, because that's not being stated here, and the teacher's frustration in the classroom setting, and you could also satisfy the needs of the child and the needs of the parent. There must be a better way, and there should be. All these three people should come together and figure out a way where you can resolve the issues of disruptive children in the classrooms, because this is extreme. I see this as the hot box in Django. I really see it as that. But I'm sure that the actual school teacher will probably be able to elucidate and make it clear to what's actually happening and any kind of solutions that's possible in educating Black children. I'll leave it there.
Appreciate that, Buana. Yeah, Trigger Happy makes a good point here. He said there is a lot to that. If schools have the energy of prisons, this means we need to rebuild architectural science from a cultural perspective too, because a lot of Western architecture is surveillance. Absolutely. I tell you, I couldn't, when I started to realize it, I couldn't unsee it again. That goes to another conversation of when you are a little bit aware out here. It's all you can muster not to be crazy. Not to be crazy with all the stuff that you constantly see that's like geared towards subjugation. That it would require us to really get back some power, but also some understanding of who we were. We got to get away from some of this shit. In fact, all of this stuff. We got to get away from this stuff. Black Seal, what say you to what you've seen and heard so far?
Man. Well, first of all, this is completely illegal, right? Whoever set this up needs to be locked and needs to go to jail. You know, there's no excuse for them to be creating solitary confinement for any child. And this makes me think this might have been a special needs child. This might have been in like what we call SPED, special education. This child probably had been difficult, had been causing problems. And it was also in a primary school, because there's no way you get no kid in high school in one of these things. But I believe it's probably just a situation of just the faculty they either weren't trained, they didn't have the proper support, they just didn't know what to do. Or also too, maybe they just didn't give a damn. And that unfortunately is a reality of the profession. Sometimes you just don't give a damn about helping these kids. You've reached your wits end. You've dealt with so many defiant situations. Apathy is a big issue within the teaching profession, because sometimes it's just you have the parents fighting back against you and the students fighting back against you, and you're just like, what's the point? So but all that said, there's no excuse for this type of nonsense. There's a reason why it's called the school to prison pipeline, right? Many of these children are funneled into the prison system. Whenever I don't have to watch ISS, but if you look at the ISS list, every morning we get an email of the kids who are in ISS and the kids who are in OSS. And they always tell us send some work down to that classroom so they can work on it. The majority of the kids in ISS tend to be Black or Hispanic. There's a lot of reasons for that, and I myself have made it a point to only write referrals as a last resort, because I know there's so many of our young people who are being caught up in these systems, being referred to the office for discipline. How are you going to pass if you're spending 3 days out of the week for ISS? But at the same time, you can't not enforce the rules. So if a child skips your class, you have to notify them. Your job could be in danger. So teachers in many places are forced to participate in this system, because you have a child who disrupts toward class, and there's many reasons why they may be disrupting. But the point is, you're still disrupting my class. So if I've talked to you about it, I've called your parent about it, now I have to refer you to the admin for discipline. But all that said, there's no excuse to lock a child in a box for discipline. That child's not going to learn anything, and you're not meant to learn anything in that situation. You're meant to know your place, right? This is a teacher who has given up on that child, and what they want to do is teach the rest of the class and have that other child out the way. There's no excuse for that, none whatsoever. I hope the family they sue, they get all their money. I don't know about homeschool. Homeschool is an option for some people, but I also we live in a country where 54% of the people can't read above a 6th grade level. So I don't know about homeschool. That hopefully that's an option for some people. But I found that the kids that I have taught, when they come from homeschool, they tend to be very behind, right? They tend to not have the reading, the math, the comprehension skills. Now, that's not the case for all of them. I certainly know there are some kids who are homeschooled that are very advanced, but I would say 9 out of 10 kids that I have taught that come from homeschool really, really struggle to keep up with the high school caseload. I've seen that just personally. African-centered schools are a great thing. I think that the education system is already biased. You know, you look at who's making the textbooks, where that information is coming from. In the United States, the biggest school district is in Texas, which is where here we go, right-wing evangelical place. So the textbooks coming out of there tend to skew very conservative. You know, it's not a objective matter. And then you have to teach these children, especially Black children, man. You got to go beyond what's taught within just the school system. And as parents and you know, people in the community, there's a responsibility to do more for our young people, because if you don't, they'll just end up being taught the mess and they'll believe it. They'll believe it. So I don't know. I think this is a horrible situation. I feel terrible for that child that was caught up in this mess. I think that's an awful situation. Whoever did this, like I said, lock them up. There's no excuse for that. Straight directly to jail. And I just have questions. What type of district is it? Is this a district that's a Title I district? Or, I mean, are we low on resources? Or what's happening here? I just have so many questions about this situation, because, you know, you would think a school district would have something going for it. Like, why isn't this child not getting a proper education? Why is it? What's going on with this? Are we in a situation where they don't have the money? I don't know. I have so many questions, but whatever the question is, there's no excuse for this. And lock their ass up.
Shout out to OG Kicks in the chat. I saw something here a second ago, but yeah, in the chat, Sister Cheryl mentions how even the food served is like prison foods, and I could swear I saw an article. I didn't read the full thing, but I saw an article this week that was saying something like leftover prison food is being given to kids in schools now. It's a thing, man. That school to prison pipeline is a thing, and what hurts me about it is that a lot of us are aware that there's this pipeline, but somehow we're not so keen on seeing all these different things. I mean, a box. You put a child in a box. Where'd you get that from? Where'd you get the idea to even do that from? You know, so this is why, you know, we really, when these topics come up and they tie into the homeschooling type thing, you know, for me, it's not even necessarily homeschooling. It's getting an African-centered education. What do I mean? You might have, for whatever reason, I've always said this, you might have to send a kid into the Eurocentric school model that our kids tend to go to. But at home, what are you doing? You don't have no kind of little curriculum. Hey, read this, sit and listen to this, do this. You don't have, right? You're not teaching some history to, even if it's, you know, history via your family to connect them to their folks, their kin, right? Like, you know, yeah.
Coco, you are an educated man, and so is everyone else on this panel. I'm as educated as most people. When you consider homeschool, you have to be adequately able to teach people. When you talk about African centered, if you ain't African centered, you ain't never read or study. I could sit down and listen to Brother Bakari is an extremely practical individual, extremely practical. So he can tell you the practical things to live life, to live in the real world. Black Steel is an educator. He could have a home-centered school. You are a sophisticated professional person. I could see you, but you talking rank and file people now. So if you pull them out of the school system, and the children need to learn basic math and English, and the teacher, Black Steel is telling you most people reading at a 6th grade level. Even if you pull them out of school, he's still creating problems. So what you can do, Koku? What you can do?
To your point, Koku, Juana, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but Juana, no, I mentioned that hold on a second. Black Steel. I mentioned that I mentioned that you might still have to send some kids to the Eurocentric schools because that's the system that we're under right now, and we might not have all the resources in you know, throughout our communities, blah blah blah, right? I acknowledge that they might still have to go there, but what I'm saying is, at the very least, this is my biggest issue with Black folks. At the very least, at home, you could practice some Gaviism. You could talk about some African leaders. You could talk about Malcolm X and have like serious discussions about what those guys meant. What was their work? What did they die for? Like, you could talk about some stuff that can still center these children. You make them understand, yeah, you go out there to that school because that's a part of the system, and you know, right now we don't have our own stuff, so you're gonna have to be a part of the system, blah blah blah. You could break it down. But to have nothing centering, even at home, to me that's a big letdown. That's a big letdown. We should be holding these kids' hands and teaching them something, tying them to some concept that was before their time. That's close to the community, man. That's what I'm talking about. Even if they still have to go to this white man's school to learn arithmetic. Brother Bakari, what say you to what you heard?
Okay. First, I want to say that being upstate New York, there probably was no black kid in that box. I'm just saying. Not saying it's right to put no kid in there, but I'm just saying it being upstate New York. It's not a whole lot of us up that way. On the homeschool thing, when we talk about homeschool, what I tried to do here, me and a couple of people was trying to do here. You want to have to find a teacher who want to work extra, maybe a few days a week. I'm gonna use Blacksdale for an instance, right? We can talk homeschool, but we do need educators, like Bwana said. And we're gonna need to pay Blacksdale for his time. And that and that became the problem. Nobody, man, we need to come up with at least if she's giving us 3 days a week after school, because our kids still need to be socialized with other kids. You can't, you're gonna just keep them in the house all the time. They have to socialize, know how to deal with other people outside. But I said we need to come up with at least $1,000 a week. Find us good teacher, who want to do this part-time. Come up with $1,000 a week. Then that became the problem. So to say our kids just need to be homeschooled, it sounds good to say. It sounds real good to say, but are we willing to do what it takes to make sure your child is homeschooled properly? So now, back to we talking about the education at the school. You're right. The school education ain't the greatest, I guess. But you know why? I'm going to be honest. You know why I didn't have a problem with the high school education? With the school education? And I'm from Mississippi. I didn't have a problem because I had some folks teaching me at home. My kids, when they went to school, they knew how to read when they was 5 years old. See, we blame the school for everything. My child is in the 2nd grade and can't read. Yeah, the school should be working on that. But were you working on their reading when they were 5? Were you working on them counting? Could they count when they were 3, 4 years old? What were you doing? Or did we just babysit, then send our kids to these European schools and say the European schools failing us, when we don't ever look in the mirror and say what we are doing wrong, right? So I know this is about the school being from the school to prison pipeline. I don't know, I guess it could be. There's certain things in there. What they say, the way it's done. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how things done in prison because I have done my best throughout my 54 years not to go in there. But could there be something to that? Yes, I would say there's something to that, especially in our community. There's something to that. But I also say there's things that we have to do. We know they want to do this to us, so why aren't we doing something different? That's all I'm saying. Yeah, they want us in prison. They want us dead. They want everything bad to us. But what are we doing for our children to make it better for them and make it easier when they go to school? Now, if that was my child, somebody put in that damn hot box, as Bwana called it, there would have been a problem. It would have been a problem. But you know why they wouldn't have put my child in that hot box? Because I knew all the damn teachers at the school where my kids went to, and I'm going to make sure I'm going to meetings. I'm doing parent-teacher meetings, and they know how they knew who I was. You're going to have problems if that's what you planning to do to my child. Don't you ever do that to my child. You shouldn't do it to none. But you ain't going to do it to mine. We have to get to know our teachers. We have to make those parent-teacher conferences. You have to make the PTO meetings when you can. Or if you can't, and this is what I tell people, something we used to talk about, if you can't make certain meetings, that's why you need to organize and group up with people, because if everybody you can't make all the meetings all the time, but at least you can have, if you got your group, 5, 10, 15 people, somebody from their group, a couple of people from their group can make the meeting to let you know what's going on. And that's what we have to do to combat that. I yield the mic.
Really quick before we go.
I know I cut off. Go ahead, Phil.
So one thing that I feel like is the problem with African-centered education is that many Black people have low racial esteem, right? They don't see the value in learning anything about Africa or learning anything about their culture. we recently, you know, we had a recent unit talking about nationalism and whatnot, independence movements and whatnot. So we had a day we talked about the Haitian Revolution, and I had a young man in my class. He's been in trouble with the law before, stealing cars or whatnot. He's always been respectful to me, but he's had some problems. He was visibly angry because he never knew how Black people were treated during slavery. He's heard the jokes that the kids say, but when he saw the people being stripped naked and whipped and, you know, all type of violence, he was like, yo, mister, is that really how they treated us during slavery? I said, yes, you sound as if you never heard it before. So he had a Black teacher like myself. There's not a lot of Black teachers at the school, but I did not learn anything about Black history within my school, honestly. Everything I learned came from my mother, and she took the time to educate me. So I say all that to say that you're not going to get any type of African-centered education for people who are African-centered, who have low racial esteem, who try their best to distance themselves from being African, who do their best to attach themselves to America. And I think that's part of the problem, is that the education is not being taught at home. The fundamental skills that can help a child at home are not being taught at home. And everything's on the teacher. You have kids in first grade who don't know how to wipe their ass. You have kids within, you know, who are coming into high school reading at a 7th grade level. So what happens when the child can't keep up in school? When they don't know the material, they become disruptive. And that's what I've seen, that when they cannot do the work, that's when they start to cause problems. So then you have to take time out your day and do individually with this one child one-on-one to help them get up to speed, to bring them up to the skills that they need to have. And then the rest of the class is falling behind. So I think it's a dual-edged sword, but I think that, to Bakari's point, it does have to be done at home. It shouldn't be a situation where you go to open house and the only parent, and this happened to me, I have open house, I have 3 parents, and all the parents that are there are the kids who have A's. So the kids who have D's and F's, their parents not only aren't responding to the emails and the phone calls, but they're not showing up to the open house to discuss their child's grades. And then we want to talk about the school failing. But it should be a cooperative effort. It should be an effort where the parents and the child work together. With that said, there are some teachers that are very, very punitive towards their students. They don't look at their students as scholars, they look at them as a problem. And these kids know that. These kids don't want to learn from somebody who will write them up for breathing hard or who's insulting their intelligence. So you do have that level of it as well. You do have some issues where the kids don't want to learn because they don't like the teacher, and the teacher doesn't like the kids. He's hostile towards the kids. He's disrespectful to the kids. And those type of things they get around. So these kids don't want to tap to participate. And that's where that school to prison pipeline comes in, where these kids already come into the school and they're treated as if they're a problem by the administrators, by the school staff, by the teachers. Then you're going to have pushback. I mean, I know we're getting off topic dealing with this child in the box, but I do think that's part of the problem.
Black Steel, why would I want to learn that the white man created everything in the whole universe, and when they find me in Africa, they find me with a bone in my nose, climbing on trees, and God help us for bringing us to America, for giving us, for civilizing us and giving us some education, because if not for that, I would be in Africa with a bone in my nose, running with lions and tigers, because I never created no contribution to humanity, to civilization. I have a deaf ear to that. I don't want to listen to that bullshit, but I mean, I understand that's a system, but I don't want to listen to it. Of course I listen to that. You know,
I could just speak. I can't speak to every state's curriculum, but I don't teach that. You know, I will say that they do. They have an entire unit based on Africa European colonization. So we teach about Ghana, Mali, Songhai. We talk about all of that. So I think we have done a little bit more than there was in the past. When I was in school, they do try to include some things that talk about European, pre-colonization Africa. So I think that's something that they have improved on.
Yeah, and let me say this, even here when my kids were in middle school, one of their history teachers, they taught about the Egypt being black. My son was here, he taught about Mansa Musa. They don't just, there are some schools, there are some teachers, even if it's not part of the school curriculum, there are some teachers that go out of their way. One of my great nieces in Mississippi, there was school she was going to, the teacher. You found a lot of these go out of their way to teach about what the greatness of Africa and us, they'll talk about us coming from Africa and what happened, and also, but the African culture that we were able to keep. So, but I understand what you're saying, Moana, for the most part, that is probably what they teach for the most part, but I'm just piggybacking off Black Steel.
Sister Cheryl, what say you? Timeout boxes. Is this a prime example of the school to prison pipeline to you?
Yeah, of course. It's just one of those things. It's just, they have to do it on a special needs population because ain't no regular kid they gonna let get away. No regular kid is gonna like look at that and be like, oh no. You know what I mean? They're gonna be like, I ain't sitting in that. They have to try it on special needs kids. I think it's like one of those things that they just do the experiment just to see what happens so they can monitor it. And it's not for really any benefit, but just to see what happens. Cause they do stuff like that all the time. So yeah, I agree pretty much what everybody says about that. But in terms of like everything else that we're talking about and like how our children are educated, I'm speaking from a certain perspective because I do have the means to teach my child at home. But I think when people say things like homeschool, they tend to everybody has a kind of a different definition of what homeschooling is. So for instance, when there was COVID and all the kids had to be at home on the computers, being taught through the computers, that's home for them, that's homeschooling. But that's not homeschooling for us as people who are Afrocentric. That's just the same thing that you get in school, which of course, when they went back to school, they were just as unprepared as before they left because they're doing the same thing that they were doing when they were in person. But to regular people, that's homeschooling. But for us, that's not homeschooling. That's not homeschooling at all. Also, when we say things like children, that are homeschooled tend to fall behind. I see what people are getting at when they're saying that, but also I think we should look at this from a different perspective because what about what about kids who don't fall behind and kids who get good grades, right? They come out, whether it's public or Catholic, whatever school, private. You have a lot of Black children that come out of these schools, and they have no idea what it means to value their own communities and to give back to their own communities. All they know, especially if they go to a Catholic school or private school, these kids, all they know is I need to go and get me a good white man job. Okay, so we got a whole nother thing that we're dealing with, and I understand some kids, they go to school, they don't understand, they don't know how to read, write, and do all that stuff. Yes, I do agree with people who say that, the parents should be there to to assist them and everything, but everybody's situation isn't the same. You got some parents, they work night shift, you know, you got all these different elements. And so I think these are the things that are contributing to that. But also, like when the child does, even if the child does have the black child has their family to help them with math and science and all of that. Fortunately, just from my perspective, my mom did that with me. That's why when I went to school was boring. It's just like a big daycare to me, because what are they really teaching us? I went to a public school, but they don't teach you how to write. They don't teach you how to really read. They just do the thing. They just do it. And if you can keep up, then you keep up. But they don't actually teach you from. That's just from a personal perspective. There's different types of public schools, and people could make the argument that, oh, well, maybe these public schools are better, or these Catholic schools are better. But are they better though? Because when these children graduate from high school, they have these good grades and all, but they don't care anything about their own community. So what is it worth? What is the value system behind it? Because if you don't have the right value system, what are we talking about?
Well, Cheryl, I think to your point, I don't think that's the school's job, though. I think that is something to be taught by the parents. I think that's kind of the issue, is that people are expecting the schools to do a little bit, take on a role that they were never meant to. I think that, these kids, parents put their kids in private school for different reasons. Like, you mentioned Catholic school. I'm just going to follow up with that. You go to many times, you got these nuns teaching these kids or whatnot. They come out and they can pass that test. They can pass the SAT, ACT, getting good test scores, and get into the college of their choice. They want to have their children go to school, learn their arithmetic and their ABCs, and learn how to do these equations and whatever the fuck, and graduate and come out and go to college, right? But the education was never meant to tie them to their culture. But I don't think that it should, that's something that it should. That is something that we as African people have to take upon ourselves, and to educate our young people to appreciate their culture. I think that's not the job of the alien, and that's the job of the enemy. Since we're forced to send our kids to school, that you got to send them there by law, go there, read, learn your mathematics, learn how to do this stuff or whatever, graduate. But at the same time, we should be instilling within them their culture. And I think the reason we don't is because our communities are so broken. The days of the Panthers Party, long gone, where they would have community organizations and book clubs and things like that. Those days are long gone.
But the school is always a reflection of the missionary systems that they have, the Christian missionary system. So like that's precisely why it doesn't matter if we as Black people are sending our children to a public school, private school, Catholic school, because a lot of parents who send their children to Catholic and private schools do so because they believe their children are going to get a better education. But to them, better is including religion. That's why they do it. So, but what I'm saying is, it's not the school's job, and that's the whole point. that's the whole point of the cultural part. I think we as Black people don't pay attention to, because our parents were also trained in the missionary way of learning. So, I mean, of course there, we can say, oh, well, it starts at home. Well, it starts at home, and we just talk in a circle. But if we don't add culture into that, it's lost. Even if you have other races of people, they send their children to these schools, but when they come out of the school, they're centered on their culture. So whatever they do, they apply it to that. They don't just run off and go and do these some of them may go to a white company and do these things, but they're encouraged by their communities to keep it within their people. And we are encouraged as Black people to do the opposite. We're encouraged to avoid our culture and don't include ourselves as the essence of who we are in what we do for work. So we don't think that's important. It's just it's the missionary school system. So I mean, we follow it wholly and fully. No culture whatsoever is involved. That's the problem.
All right. If there's no last thoughts here, by the way, shout out to Kofi, the Black Critic out there in the chat. If there's no last thoughts here, let's go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 5, which will probably be the last topic for tonight. If you haven't already, please hit the like button, share the show to your social media. Also join the Discord. The link is down in the description. You can join today. Shoot a Breeze topic number 5 says, when discussing the revival of African spirituality, is it smarter to build internally from Abrahamic practices or to build outside them? Or should both be combined? This comes with a link that's going to take us to YouTube, to a ComG verse video. We'll watch it and then we'll comment.
I'm agreeing, we steady on. Fire burning. The drums guide our stride. We march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide. Our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kanji verse.
Today I want to talk about a debate, that's been consistent throughout, Africana studies, and it's about just the relationship between Christianity and ancient Kemetic divination, or ancient Kemetic spirituality, ancient Kemetic reality, and Christianity, and whether or not the word Amen has roots in classical Africa. Now, the two sides of this debate are Obadele Kambone of the University of Ghana, and Dr. Salim Fariji, and Dr. Jahi Issa. Now, these two sides have had contentious discussions over this point, over the years, and the two sides go as follows. There is one side who doesn't necessarily want to find any connection between the Abrahamic traditions and African spirituality. A side that would prefer to keep those things in two distinct categories and even, remove any association with the Abrahamic traditions due to its assimilationist nature and the fact that, the majority of Black people who participate within Abrahamic traditions do carry an assimilationist tract. So many of those, like Obadele Kambone, who would be more pure on this issue, would prefer to completely separate and completely disassociate from any traditions that would be Abrahamic, any traditions that would be from the Amu, and any traditions that would be of Western Asian origin. Whereas, Salim Fariji and Dr. Jahi Issa's approach is more so taking a syncretic look at things and just dealing with the reality that most Black people around the world are adherents of Abrahamic traditions. So their approach would be to meet them where they are and show them certain links between these two different systems and domains. So that's kind of where, this conversation goes. Again, Kambone's side would be very, very aggressive and meticulous in trying to make sure that there are no, connections or links made that remove agency from African people. Whereas Dr. Jahi Fariji or Jahi Issa and Salim Fariji would take a more, syncretic, coalescent approach to this question. Now, Kwame Osei, Dr. Fariji, and Dr. Issa released a book called African Origin of Amen. And this book was heavily criticized by Dr. Obadele Kambone, who was coming from a historical linguistic perspective. And this would be his specialty and not necessarily the specialty of the other scholars. And according to Kambone's analysis, he saw the text as lacking methodological rigor, right? And more so based upon superficial resemblances rather than a systematic evidence-based etymological analysis. So according to Cambone, he saw the text as folk etymology rather than legitimate historical linguistics. And to the defense of Osei, Issa and Faraghi, the text was more so meant for laymen, not necessarily meant to be a technical text. But again, this kind of made them fall into the criticism of, a linguistic professor in Cambone. So, Cambone's also, criticized a scholar for not properly reading the Medu Neter and confusing, the bilateral sign amen with imen, or the specific word for amen, right? So according to Cambone, there's a lot of different words with this sequence, right? So that error, along with, some of the grammatical constructs, such as the masculine dual suffix we, right? And, misinterpreting that as the Akan word for son, according to Cambone, was a very, very a fatal error. And Cambone, from a historical linguistic perspective, did not see a proper reading of Akan, morphology. And he did not necessarily see a careful consideration of morpheme boundaries. And, he noted this in the critique of the analysis of Samanfo ancestors and Asamando, ancestral land. And according to Cambone, the scholars incorrectly isolated amen, ignoring the plural prefix and the nominalizer in the root, saman. So he went on just to have a lot of different other critiques of the scholars, right? And the term many, being on the King's list, being etymologically distinct from imen, according to Cambone, this is not necessarily something that you could associate with amen. And the list goes on and on in this article that he wrote, right? So again, Cambone did not agree with the analysis of these scholars, particularly for the morphological considerations with respect to Aman and the morpheme boundaries, and not necessarily correctly parsing out the names in the Medu Neter, right, and the associations with Akan, right? So, Cambone, according to Cambone, with respect to the scholars, he actually cited, Theophilo Benga, who did connect Imen in ancient Kemet to many different, names and titles in the African continent, right? And according to, Theophilo Benga's text, he did believe that there was a plausible etymological root between Amen and Imen in ancient Kemet, as well as the large plurality of deities used in the African continent that presumably are related to Amen, right? Now, doctors like Sandro Capocicci, who would come more in line with, the traditional Africanist approach, the Newman approach, Arid approach, he actually saw the linkage between, these different versions of deities in West Africa and Central Africa as an example of a tradition that was spread across the continent, but didn't necessarily coincide with the same phonological development. And he wrote about this in an article in critique of Theophilo Benga and the conventional Benga-Diopian approach. So Sandro Capocicci would promote more of a constructivist, linguistics, and he would more so argue for different contact borrowing between the classical Africa or dynastic pharaonic Africa and neighboring African cultures and civilizations, right? So, Jahi Issa and Salim Faraghi did offer, right, some critiques, right, to Obadale Cambone, right? And according to them, right, they saw the critique as basically limited to historical linguistics, right? They did not necessarily intend for the text to be a super technical analysis. they more so wanted to open the door to the conversation. So they wrote a critique to Cambone's analysis in the Senegalese Historical Review. And they argue that Cambone's review was limited by its exclusive reliance on historical and comparative linguistics, which they label as a disciplinary myopia. Now, in Cambone's, defense, his analysis was a linguistic analysis solely rooted in whether or not the term amen, used at the end of prayers in Abrahamic faiths had an African origin. Whereas Jahi Issa and Salim Fariji wanted to take a pluridisciplinary approach to seek to connect, the West African Akans with, classical Africa. We certainly have numerous lines of evidence to corroborate this. And they critique Cambone for having an Egyptocentric bias, and they assert that his interpretive model is over-reliant on Kemet without looking at broader African context. So their proposal was to situate Akan and West African history within the context of Happy River Valley civilizations such as Meroe, Kush, and Sudanic Sahelian Africa, rather than primarily basing it on dynastic Kemet. In their analysis, right, their claim is that Kush, or the southerly populations, is more important to Happy River Valley civilizations for maintaining cultural continuity and unity with other regions of Africa. They reassert the central thesis of their book that the words Amen, Aman, and Aman are cognates of the ancient Kemetic Imen, and that this connection not only exists in Kemet, but also Napatin, Meroe, Kush, the Akan of Ghana, and throughout West and Central Africa. So their rebuttal to Cambone in the Senegalese Historical Review shifts the argument from a defense solely based on linguistic methodology to a critique of Cambone's scholarly framework, while regrounding their original thesis in different geographical and civilizational contexts, right? So if we look at the argument altogether, which scholar was more correct, right? Again, if we're specifically looking at the origin of the words, we would have to go to historical comparative linguistics, right? And we would have to make sure that we have a meticulous, rigorous stance. However, in terms of understanding the roots and the traditions of African people, there are other fields that we could establish, this connection as well, just to the defense of Dr. Fariji and Dr. Issa, whether we're dealing with archaeology, whether we're dealing with genetics, whether we're dealing with, even orthography, some of the orthographic traditions that we see commonalities in the Akan, gold weight script, as well as the Medu Neter, and on and on and on. So, having a pluridisciplinary approach is important. And though, Cambone's criticism is warranted, we have to be careful with not necessarily limiting, our analysis to one field, even if we are answering questions in one domain, right? But ultimately, I think both of these scholars, they could benefit from, collaboration and working together. And I know that Issa and Cambone have met recently in Burkina Faso, so they were able to have a conversation about this. But generally speaking, whether or not, we can find certain roots of, these ancient Abrahamic traditions in classical Africa, I think we definitively can. But what we decide to do with that is up to us. Personally, I don't think that, the complete castigation of these traditions without understanding the leverage that we may be able to build within them is smart, especially if the majoritarian position in that most Black people in Abrahamic traditions won't necessarily be able to listen to us or hear us unless we're speaking their language. I think it's smarter, right? The more intelligent approach, would be on the side of Issa and Fariji. Though I do understand where Obadale Cambone is coming from when it comes from the, complete dissolution of agency with respect to these traditions. That is definitely true, and we definitely have to find a more African-centered root. And I'm one who have said that, both major Abrahamic faiths will probably or most likely be reformed as the demographics of them continue to evolve and as Africa, the African century, rises, as the African population becomes a majority. that is definitively bound to happen. But I take the perspective of Ibrahim Boumunjoya in his Nuet being pursue and achieve, in being able to develop agency and space within these domains and being able to build leverage within these domains with respect to the ancestral root that we know that Black men and Black women and Black cultures and Black civilizations have had with respect to these traditions, right? In the Bible, Acts 7:22, where it talks about Moses was learned in all of the ways of the Egyptians, showing that the most important prophet of Judaism was rooted in the Kemetic foundation. And even the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ described his ancestor Hajar and her people in ancient Kemet as Black. So within both traditions, we do find a foundation of, Black civilizational greatness. And we should be able to use that leverage to approach as a teacher, as opposed to, having a directly antagonistic approach that I don't think would get the job done. So with respect to this, that's my take on this argument. What do you think of this argument? Do you agree more with Obadale Cambone or Dr. Issa and Dr. Faraghi? Let me know in the comments below. That's all I got for you on this. I hope to catch you on the next one. Peace.
Okay. Little roundabout way of doing it, but I get it. It's a little bit of that, Christianity comes from Africans kind of discussion on one side. On the other side, it's like, let's kind of get away from that. Even if there is a connection, be damned. Let's kind of get away from that. So that's the basis of the topic here. Should we build internally? In other words, should we latch on to this idea that some of these terminologies and what have you is built from an African culture, or should we just forget about that and really unite through our own, or revive our own African spirituality? I'm kind of like Campbell in that sense. I think you just get back to your own spirituality. Well, let's see what my panelists think. By the way, good evening goes out to Nelly, shouting us out, the KWAZ radio family, as well as the Bitter Medicine family. So appreciate that. But once again, Shooter Breeze topic number 5, when discussing the revival of African spirituality, is it smarter to build internally from Abrahamic practice or to build outside them? Or should both be combined? Where should I start with this one? Let me start with Buana on this one. Buana, what's it?
Yeah, I personally think that for me, I always try to follow the example of the people who've had success in whatever goal you're trying to achieve. So Farrakhan them did it in the same manner. They tried to be inclusive. When they spoke, they tried to be inclusive of the Bible and the Quran, in gearing their people towards a more purest form. I guess they stay in the middle, but a more pure form of Islam, and there are always going to be purists who want to just completely reject one way to replace it with another thing. And I get that as well. But at the end of the day, if you are trying to convince your people or people who you feel like you need to convince, I feel like it needs to be done incrementally. You can't remove or yuck the rug from under people's feet where they've been dependent on a system for years and years and years and years. You have to convince them incrementally. There are some people who is beyond the curve. They don't need the whole spoon feed me until I get to a certain point. They're already there. So you could teach them from that point. But there are others, you have to bring them along. So, like I say, you'll have to have 2 classrooms. You have to have the purest classrooms, like Obadale Cambone, and then you have to have the Issa camp, where they gradually take you to a position where you could eventually get to where you need to go. You have to have 2 classrooms. But what I would tell these 2 brothers too, and including Kamji, because Kamji is a brilliant man, is if you are trying to reach masses of people. See, the reason why Islam and the reason why Christianity was spread so quickly and vast is because you could take that idea and break it down to a 3rd grader, where a 3rd grader could understand the needs of how they could implement whatever spiritual philosophy idea into their lives and make it better. You could break it down to them. The academic discussions, sometimes I know they needed to be had in academic circles. But when you are trying to reach the rank and file person, you must be able to communicate these thoughts and ideas in a way that it'll reach them to where they could feel like, if I implement these ideas, it'll be beneficial to my life. And Islam is so simplistic. It was taught by a person who was an unread, unlettered person. So he could appeal to the person who have never read a book, as well as if you decide to get deeper into the philosophies and religious ideas, you could have these academic intellectual dialogues to the person in the highest level of academia. You know, so I feel like sometimes these discussions alienate our people, whether it's and I think it's unintentionally being done, because the brothers are at a certain level, and because they are at a certain level, they have these dialogues at that level, but you're alienating so many other people who would be interested, but you have to bring them along. And as Black Steel say, most of us reading at a 6th grade level, many of us are non-readers. Many of us are non-readers. This is the truth, man. So I feel like you have to bring your people along and put them in a perspective almost on a rudimentary level, elementary level first, before you start giving them the strong food. The food it'll be more tougher for them to digest. You have to spoon feed people first and gradually bring them along. Not everyone, but for the most part, if you want to reach an audience of people, you got to do it that way. You got to do it that way. And I feel like sometimes the brothers, they're running ahead. They're running ahead, and they don't need to. They don't need to. But it's all in, for me, at the end of the day, it's all intended on who you're trying to reach and where you're trying to get your people to move to. But that's the position what I would take on these kinds of things. But I'll leave it there, Koku.
Buana Trigger in the chat says, I don't know, this video didn't seem too technical. He's basically saying amen, or amen, is in Christianity and an African spirituality connection.
Trigger happy is an intellectual as well. And like I say, we in this the dialogues we have, we give strong food. That's why our numbers are high, very high. You know, we in this entertaining. You have to bring some intellectual vigor to have the conversations that we have to this platform, or else you sound like you're babbling. You have to bring something to the table. And where people don't have nothing on, they don't have. It's almost like the last discussion we was having before. How you could teach your children, homeschool children, ideas and concepts that the parents don't know themselves. How you could start from that level if the parents don't know about history of Africa or mathematics or English? How you could start to say homeschool the children when the parents don't know themselves? You know, you're hustling backwards in my opinion. But this is how I see it, and I could be completely wrong, but this is just how I see it.
Yeah, you know, Buana, I said after the playing of the video, I said it was a little bit of a roundabout way to get to the ultimate point. And Trigger basically surmises it here. He says basically Black people migrated from the Happy River Valley, and foreigners studied from Black people to build Christianity and Islam. Seems simple to me. Yeah, that's I think that's what Buana is kind of expecting, that to be the point, as opposed to all the other, you know, all the other terminologies and technical, it gets kind of technical. So I kind of understand where Buana's coming from. I want to ask Buana one quick question, and maybe I shouldn't ask it, but we're here now. I'm going to ask Buana, if you had to describe Camg's audience, how would you describe Camg's audience?
I would think that most of Camg's audience are Afrocentric centered, but most of his audience have done the work already. They are readers. They could go a little bit deeper underneath the surface of things, underneath the superficial layers of just being an African person, or we had a good history and past. He goes a little bit deeper, and he refers you and directs you to sources that, if you are interested and have the time to do it, you will have a good benefit of his discussions and dialogues, most of it. But the truth is, YouTube is work off of entertainment. YouTube don't want intellectual vigor. YouTube want entertainment, fast and quick, easy entertainment, where I don't have to go somewhere to digest the material. And like I say, our channel works the same way. And this is the reason our numbers are so low. If we was having cartoons and we was fighting each other and cussing each other out and calling each other all kind of crazy, we'd have 100,000 people and saying anti-African things as well, by the way. We'd have 100,000 people. But our audiences are always going to be the way it is. And it's for a reason that way. Just as we talk about history, the people who sought to be free off of plantations and be runaways, they were always in the low numbers. They didn't represent the large majority of the people. The large majority of the people accepted the plantation for what it is. They wasn't trying to change the plantation. They was comfortable in the affairs of the plantation. The woman, Harriet Tubman said, I could have freed a bunch of people if they didn't know they were slaves. But it is what it is, and I won't be critical of my people. I just recognize that there are some shortfalls sometimes that some of the brothers don't recognize. In particular, the more intellectually or cerebral groups of my brothers, when they get together, they don't consider the vast population of us. First of all, are non-readers, and a lot of us don't think critically. Now that's a shame to see, because I don't like to say admit them kind of things, but it's just true. It's just, I can't lie to you, Koku. It's just true. You know what I mean? But I'll leave it, Koku. I'll leave it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, except I would say that we need to be critical listeners, thinkers, discussers, etc. So I applaud what Kamji is doing. I just don't know for certain what's the audience there. But to your point, Buana, I will say that, how Trigger Happy broke it down in those two comments, that's pretty much the video. That's pretty much the idea. That's the concept, right? And so let's talk about it from the comments that Trigger would have used to surmise the video.
I think you're gonna asking me, okay.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, it's a video about this terminology was used in ancient Kemet, and we find it now in Christianity, Islam, Christianity. Do we waste up our let me not say it like that. That's a biased way of saying it. Do we take that and say, okay, that's ours, and we follow that path of, well, Christianity is ours. It's built off of our ancient culture and Kemet, etc. Or do we say, like a Cambone will say, why bother with that Christianity stuff? We've seen the damage that it's done to us, the Abrahamic religions in general. We've seen the damage that it's done to us. Why even try to change this thing or to make this thing advantageous from within when we have our own African spiritualities we can go right into right now? Now, Buana makes a good point that, well, you don't really just pull the rug from under people. You gotta Do it gradually. You gotta do it in increments. Some people will see it that way as well. Some people will see it as just rip the bandage right off. Brother Bakari, which way do you see it?
I see it as meeting people where they are. If you want people to, and this is kind of like the way I may have went at people, the way I can say this now as I grew older. If you really want people to listen to you, and you want people to come on your side, you can't just go insulting people, telling people that they're wrong. I do believe you meet people where you are. And if you're confident in what you're teaching when you meet them where they are, you can show a connection. And we don't know what people or how many more people we could get with us. Like Wawana said, we tend to alienate people with the way we do it sometimes. So for me, I say, man, we meet them where they are. I hear the mic.
I appreciate that, Brother Bakari. In the chat, Trigger Happy says, for me, like I mentioned before, it can be a useful strategy if the goal is to completely eliminate Christianity and go back to a strong and clear Kemet root paired with other local but related practices. So I'm not certain exactly what Trigger meant in the first part. Do you mean it could be advantageous to us to actually try to change Christianity and Islam and stuff from within? I think there is the verses of reality versus theory. And I think a lot of times we hope in our theory that we can just snap the finger and make the change. And so I have to come back and agree with Brother Bakari and them and others, if this is what Trigger is saying, in that you're probably going to have to meet people where they are. The problem for me with that is it's really the same original problem of syncretism that you see like in the Caribbean and South America, where these guys hid their African spirituality in these Abrahamics and did it for so long that you start to lose the fact that, you hid your African spirituality in the Abrahamics. I think something similar can happen where, because you're trying to navigate through the Abrahamics back to this African spirituality that comes from ancient Kemet, etc., I think in doing that, you're going to probably find yourself getting deeper into the Abrahamic. So that's my only caution with it, is that, in doing that, you probably got to then go back and study what's Abrahamic, what's foreign from what isn't foreign. And in doing that, that's also more immersion into that thing. So that's my issue. But the truth is, the reality versus the theory is we probably will have to meet people where they are and try to navigate in the way I just described. But my issue, like I said, it's by the time you do that, I think you stand a chance to be deeper into a thing. Black Steel, what say you?
So I am once again of two minds on this issue. On one hand, I understand the need to build connections, right? So many of our people have been indoctrinated into non-African, Afrocentric, and non-African, Eurocentric, Abrahamic belief systems, right? So if we're gonna build community, if we're going to organize, we're gonna have to organize with some Black people that are Christian, that are Muslim. So think about it. The major religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity did not originate in Europe. They actually originated in Western Asia and Africa. However, to his point about Amen being coming from the African languages, I mean, to me, I think that's a very dangerous line of thought because it kind of puts a veneer on the religions. So many of my most brainwashed Christian friends that I know, and I love them like my family, but I sometimes it can be a bit much because the first thing they want to say is that, you know, Christianity is from Africa, has parts from Africa. And that may be true, but that doesn't erase the harm that Christianity has done and continues to do. Not only that, whenever people say that, I always ask them what church do they go to? Because for some reason Christianity started in Africa or has African roots, but for some reason they still belong to a European denomination. They're probably Baptist, which originates in Europe, Catholic, Episcopalian, Methodist. I could go on and on. So even though African Christianity does have African elements to it, right? And I can agree with that. We can talk about amen and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, you are still belong to you're not, whenever people say that, they don't ever belong to a denomination of Christianity that started in Africa. They're not in the Ethiopian church, right? They're not in the Coptic Egyptian church. They always belong to something that started in Germany, like Martin Luther, you know? And then so to me, by saying Christianity started in, you know, it has elements of, you know, African spirituality going back to Kemet. Okay. I mean, I can smoke a bag of that. I can see, but and then so what? So what does that erase the mental domination? And one thing that any religion, but one thing I noticed about, you know, those religions that we call Abrahamic religions, you know, monotheistic Christianity, Islam, Judaism, is that their ability to literally erase the higher level cognitive skills of their worshipers, right? That is something, and we have to accept that. So they don't care what science says, what history says, so on and so forth. They're willing to ignore all of that because God said something, or it says something in their Bible, or something in their Bible contradicts it. And for one thing I've noticed with many religious people, they don't know history, right? So when we talk about the religion and how it helped to bring science down, you know, in history and during the Renaissance, when you have astronomers and scientists discovering the nature of the world and the universe, their lives were threatened because they refused to go along with what the church's doctrine was. So there's never any account for that because they don't know that history. So saying one word within the religion comes from, you know, ancient Kemet. I mean, yeah, but so what, man? So what? I don't really see the big deal of it. I think we can reach across the aisle because I believe that we should be working to de-evangelize people. I also believe, like Brother Malcolm said, keep your religion in the closet, right? That what you do in your personal life is your personal life. Let's come on, get this business done. The problem with that is that you have people who put their spirit, their religion above their racial priorities, right? So I'm a Christian first, they'll say. I'm a Christian first, then I'm black. I'm a Christian who's black, not a black Christian, right? Because their religion takes priority. You can't work with them people because while you may be willing to put aside your African spirituality in the interest of the larger good, they're not willing to put aside their European Christianity, right? They're going to sit up here and try to get you to come to their church, so on and so forth. Those individuals you can't work with. Some people you can. Hey man, what you do is in your home is fine. Keep it to yourself, and I'm perfectly okay with that. Trigger Happy asked me, does that mean that for the 40 black people? Is it legitimate? You're going to have a hard time convincing them not to be what they are, right? And I think that is going to be a problem when trying to build unity and connections. I think the goal of de-evangelizing, as Diallo Kenyatta has said, call it de-evangelizing. I think it's a good goal. I think it's something we should work towards. But I don't know how we would come across doing that without alienating. Because you know our people, you Black people are the most religious people in the world, as Dr. John Henry Clark said, that we will out-pope the Pope and we will out-Muhammad Muhammad. We are the true believers. So in the interest of that, I don't know how you could work to de-evangelize those people. As far as to remain that, I don't see how you're gonna convince them otherwise. But again, you got to find your allies where you can. Sometimes you may have to put aside some of the bigger issues in order to get to sit down and solve a bigger problem. So maybe that's something we put on the back burner and we can deal with at a later date. You know, that's just my thoughts on it. But I don't really see, you know, okay, amen, you know, whatever comedic similarities you might see within Christianity. To me, it just as a way to hide the damage and the harm done by this religion and putting with the African veneer. I don't like that at all. And I've heard that many times that, you know, for those of us who are Pan-African, who speak out against Christianity, Islam, and so on and so forth, well, it comes from Africa anyway. And you know, Moses was educated by Egyptians, and when Muhammad was persecuted, his first imam was a Black man, and so on other stuff. But again, so what? At the end of the day, does a Black person being involved in this religion do anything to negate the harm that is caused? There was recently a story about, you know, some preacher in Ghana predicted the end of the world. God was going to come and flood the world again. People were selling their belongings and, you know, trying to buy places on this man's ark that he was building. And the dude was hustling these poor people who don't even read their Bible. Because if you read your Bible, you would know God said he's not going to flood the world again. So, I mean, if you're going to play the game, at least know how the rules are played. At least read the rule book if you're going to play the game, you know? But does you know, the comedic relationship with within Christianity, does that absolve him of the harm if he's obviously stealing these people's money and hustling them? I don't think so. I think it's a moot point. I mean, I feel like it's a quibbling thing. Who cares at the end of the day if this has religion? Overall, Christianity is a net negative for our people in the long run, as it has been for centuries. And we were among the first Christians. Christianity was in Africa before it was in Europe, as many of them will say. But so what? So that's all. I think that. Thank you.
Well stated, Black Steel. Well stated. Does anyone on the panel have any last thoughts or any?
Yeah, Cuckoo. If you tell the typical Christian, Bahamian Christian, that if it wasn't for Martin, because Black Steel mentioned Martin Luther, if you tell the typical Christian that if it wasn't for Martin Luther, you would be a Catholic, you know what he could tell you? Say, what Martin Luther King have to do with me being? My grandmommy was a Baptist.
That's exactly
my grandmother was a Baptist. What you talking about? You know, it had nothing to do with Martin Luther King. This is what they'll tell you. And then if you tell an Anglican Bahamian that if the King of England didn't want to divorce his wife, you would be a Catholic. They'll say, "What you talking about? I was born about it." So if you starting at just on a simple historical thing in terms of Christianity itself, imagine removing all of that Christian history outside of the Bible and then taking them to commit and teaching them other kinds of principles. Imagine me mentioning my art. They gonna ask you what you talking about. So you have to disentangle yourself from that whole historical narrative before you even get all the way over to Kemet and start reintroducing, by the way, these kinds of spiritual ideas and thinking and philosophies to life. That's why I say it have to be gradual, because people gonna look at you crazy, Black Steel. They gonna look at you crazy. You know, so you have to start at a certain point and eventually get to the other point. The brothers them say, no, the hell with that. We going straight over to Kemet. Needless to say, all us come from West Africa, because people can start asking that question too. So didn't we have religions in West Africa? What about those religions? So like I say, you have to disentangle yourself first before you start to bind yourself to other things. And I say that there are other brothers who are ahead of the curve, but even if you are ahead of the curve, you have to reach back. What they say, Sankofa, you have to reach back and start gradually reintroducing and training your people incrementally, and it might outlast your life. Give it to someone else who will do the same, who will take the time to do the same kind of things. Because if you remove the rug itself, it won't last. It won't last. You can get a few people, but you ain't gonna get the people you're actually trying to reach. And you ain't gonna reach the goal of what you eventually trying to reach, is re-Africanizing the people itself. But that's where I am with it. But I'll leave it. I'll leave it.
I just want to add that 1 second, Bakari. I just want to add that what Warner just said in that last thing is also kind of what Kamji and Obadeli Kamban and folks like that is actually trying to do, is to educate us that there is a connection between us and Kemet. And you can see it in the linguistics as you march across the continent. You realize that what happened, and it's also in what's that book called again? I can't think of the book's title right now, but it's also in that book that tells you that basically we come from Kemet. We were in pursuit and chased around the continent, and some of those people came across the continent to West Africa, and you could follow the language. If you follow the linguistics of it, you'll see.
I think was that destruction of black civilization.
Destruction of black civilization. That's it, right? So that's what Kamji and Cambon and them are doing. So that's baked into the topic, that you shouldn't have to do too much explaining or too much convincing once you teach them to begin with. We all came from Kemet initially, right? We just got chased around and pursued and spread out and all that type of stuff. Most of us came from Kemet, I should say. I think Brother Bakari wanted to add something. Brother Bakari, go ahead.
Yeah, what I wanted to add was I think when I heard Black Steel say the end evangelism, I guess that's like the end the religion or whatever. I think some things we're not gonna do. You're not gonna be able to end it because Black people gonna keep, and they're gonna keep that. So I just think we just gonna have to learn how to work with one another. So far as me and what I would do, I don't even want to try and end it, because back to my original point, trying to end it, we're gonna alienate people. I think there should be a freedom of what, if they want to have their religion, let them have their damn religion. But on the other hand, they have to, and I tell them, and I tell Christians all the time, you want people to respect your religion, you have to respect Christians and Muslims, because it ain't just Christians. You have to respect other people's religion. You can't tell me that something is wrong with me if I say I study voodoo. I know what y'all feel about voodoo. You've been taught it's evil, but that's my choice. So if you want me to leave you alone with what you do, leave me alone about what I do, and let's just work toward straightening our community, actually creating a community, because right now we don't have a community. We have what people call the hood. We the only people in the world that don't even have neighbors. We just got a hood. We don't have a neighborhood. So we have to get back to that. And in that process, once we learn to respect one another and have some type of respect for one another, I think we'll be able to work together regardless.
But Bakari, you don't think it's a bit problematic if you're talking about creating communities and neighborhoods, nations, etc. You don't think it's a bit problematic that a central tenant in a certain number of black folks within that community, that neighborhood, that nation, they are stuck on a white ideology of like Christianity, Catholicism, and Islam, and all this kind of stuff. Now, I know that there's other things that black folks could still carry on from the white man, but in terms of just like a core thing like your belief in God, you don't think there's a little bit of a problem having people around you who believe in a white God?
Okay, I don't do I think it's a problem? It can be a problem. Yes, it's a problem. But are you going to stop are you going to end it? You're not going to end it. So you have to figure out a way to work with people. You have to figure out a way to work with your people. I know I'm not the only person that like history, but the Mongolians, how much stuff did the Mongolians control? And one of the things they did, the reason they were able to control what they controlled was people were allowed to have whatever, were allowed to keep their religion and allowed to do whatever they wanted to do. Even you would find Mongolians that became Muslim or Christian, but they remained Mongolian first. And that has to be the goal. If we can get our people to be black first, that's the thing, be race first. You can't be, I'm a Christian, like Black Steel said, and I've heard him say it too, but like Black Steel said, you heard him say, I'm a Christian that happens to be black, or I'm a Muslim that happens to be black. No, you're born black and you happen to be a Christian. You're born black and you happen to be a Muslim. So, like most, okay, I'm gonna say it like this. The neighborhood you grew up in, right? You had your crew, right? But then there was other people in the neighborhood that had their crew. You didn't necessarily, y'all didn't run together. You had your crew, they had their crew, right? But y'all weren't enemies. Y'all could go shoot ball together. Y'all might even hang out together, sit down and talk, be at cookouts together. But they wasn't part of your crew. You had your crew that you ran with, and they had their crew and they people that they ran with. But somehow you were able to coexist without hating and without wanting to fight one another. Because I think if we try to end it, it would be I think it's going to be more of a problem than what it is now. I ain't saying that it's somebody worshiping white Jesus is not a problem, but most people would tell you they don't worship a white Jesus. This is why I tell people about my dude, Dr. F. Keith Slaughter, check out his church. While he's preaching out the Bible, and you can hear him, he's going to talk about Jesus, but he has statues of his African God around the pulpit while he's preaching, and he's talking about Jesus, but he'll still pay homage to African gods. He figured out a way to put Africa inside of the religion. I don't know if I made sense. I was trying to.
I want to add to that. Brother Bakari, my goodness, man. You Brother Bakari, find a fusion. Support Jesus, support you white Jesus, but go to Brother Bakari restaurant. Support your white Jesus, but I have Thelma down the road. She does here. Support her business. So go to church every Sunday, pay tithes and 10%. But we have this cooperative farm where black folks getting together to distribute fruits and vegetables among the community. Come support that as well. You know, there are some things that people are going to stick to regardless, but how you operationalize it, because since we live in a hypocritical world, you go to church and support your white Jesus, but I need you to support this program where we feeding kids primarily who look like us, to make sure that when they go to school, they have their bellies full of food and they can be educated correctly. Or we gonna support Black Steel in his operation in trying to homeschool children. Go to church, by all means, but we need you to do these things as well. You give them, allow them the privilege, but give them the obligation to support black things, operational Black things as well.
Nah. Y'all, you know better than that. You give white people you give Black people to support white Jesus, they're gonna support white people.
That's true. I mean, they will, they will. But some of them, but Coco, some of them will. Like Slaughter, like you say, the Slaughter. Brother Bakari talk about Slaughter. They go into church, the Christian church, but the programs that he develops within his community is primarily benefiting who? I mean, I don't know. I think there should. I agree with Bakari. There should be a fusion. It have to be.
But Wanda, what you just said is what they do. They got the community garden for the Black, is in the middle of the Black community, in Pittsburgh community. In the West Atlanta, they had a community garden. Everybody in the community can come work there. They get what you say, got vegetables giveaway. That's what they do. They give grocery. That's what they do. And it's gonna, I'm just being honest. In order for us to do the things that we want to do, it's gonna have to be a fusion. I ain't saying, Koku, you have to start worshiping white Jesus, because I know you're not. Black Steel, I know you're not. I know I'm not. I'm not saying we have to give up who we are. See, while we're being who we are, see, we're gonna be the example of showing what we believing in, right? How it worked for our people. So we don't force them. Don't force, because I've tried forcing. And shit, and people tend to get away from you, right? But you just be the example. This is what this is doing for you. Or you don't talk about it at all. You just do what you do. People ask me if I believe in God. A lot of time I smile. Do I believe in a higher power? Yes, I believe in a higher power. Do I believe in God? If somebody was at the church, and I tried not to have this conversation, but they took me there, and I think then they got turned off because they didn't like my response. But they was telling me about Jesus this and Jesus that, and then went to the point where they were like, worshiping your ancestors ain't gonna do nothing for you. They're dead. And at that point, see what they did was they were pushing me to a point. And this is what I used to do to people. So at that point, when they say worshiping your ancestors ain't gonna do nothing for you, they're dead. Shit, Jesus dead. Didn't his daddy, the first deadbeat daddy in the world, was the God of the Bible, who let somebody put his son up on a damn cross and beat the hell out of him and then stick a damn sword in his side and kill him? And he wouldn't even come down and save him. So that was my response, but I just left it alone. But what I'm saying is, I believe in a higher power. I can't explain it. I can't explain what the higher power is. But that's me. But if they had never brought this stuff up to me, the conversations that we were having and was talking about doing for the community and the things that they wanted to do for the community and how we could work together, everything was going to be cool until they tried to force me to say my beliefs was nothing and Jesus is the only way and he's on the right hand of God and so on and so forth. And that's part of, I just let people be who they are. And if I can work with people, I work with people. And what got me, another reason that got me to this point, then I'm going to close the mic because it seems like I might be rambling. But if we want the church to do better, y'all know history. The church was our revolutionary stronghold. Y'all know that. You know why the church is not the revolutionary stronghold no more? Because the revolutionaries don't go no more. We allowed the weak people, we allowed the weaker men who ain't about revolution to come take over the church when the church used to be the revolutionary stronghold and the people that want to do for the community. Man, I'm telling you, these men, a lot of these people that was in church, they weren't in church because they were just diehard Christians. They were in church because we own that building. That was our meeting place. That where we could organize. That where we could fundraise. that way we could feed the community. We did all that out of the church. But the strong people, like myself, because I consider me strong, like myself, like y'all brothers who had a revolutionary spirit, we stepped away from what we owned, what we controlled, our meeting spaces, and we allowed weak individuals who's greedy, who want to scam you, to get in there and take over, and we stay on the outside and talk. But we should be doing what our ancestors used to do. We should be the ones in there strong. We ain't got to believe like that, but we do know that is our meeting place, and we should be handling that business. Just my thought.
You guys who are mods in the chat, you're still there. Make sure to get this guy, Big Daddy, Big Pussy, who says perhaps you could build up the wheel, you know, the thing that eluded your forebears until Asians and Europeans showed up. A complete idiot. But anyway, man, if there's no last thoughts, that was our last prompt for tonight. Before you guys leave the space, the panel, if you don't mind, man, let's go through some shout outs that you know we try to do every week, something positive we've either seen or experienced ourselves over the course of a week. Let me just go down the line. Brother Bakari, what would you like to shout out this week?
I want to shout out you for constantly being here. Shout out for Bawana for saying strong Black Steel on the panel. You know, I ain't feeling right. Me and Black Steel ain't got an argument on the panel in a while. So next week I might have to create something for me and him to get in there. But other than that, man, everything is good. Oh, look, I don't know if y'all saw this. This part of my shout outs, and trust me, I'm not shouting this guy out. The FBA scammer who hate all Black people that's not from the United States saw I Show Speed go to Africa and blow up. Now, guess who's in Africa posting all over his social media, according to some people I follow because I don't follow him. So now guess who's talking about Dan Senegal chilling, posting up, trying to grift off I Show Speed. And then what made me think about them, but want to call somebody say they're hypocrites. That's the ultimate hypocrite grifter. So he want to grift off. I don't know if y'all know who I Show Speed is, but he want to grift off I Show Speed, who was in Africa, and after being in Africa, who gained like 50 million plus followers in like 7 days from the love that the Africans was giving him on the continent. Now the damn FBA grifter is over there after he done did all this hating and crapping on Africans from the continent. He's over there posting up, talking about how he's chilling on that, man. Oh yeah, and by the way, shout out to the damn chat. And on that, I yield the mic.
Appreciate that, bro. Because you know, I meant to bring up that Bakari is talking about Nasheed, who was posted he was in Senegal. Then today I saw a post. I guess he's in Ghana right now. So you know, shout out to that nonsense and the people who believe in it.
Hey, one more thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Coco, let me ask you this. We need to do a live. Said I was going to do it on my channel, but I don't know when I'm going back over there. But we need to just take us one day, do a live and talk about this Black Panther thing where people beating up the brother. Just standing out, talking about he ready to fight back and how quick we are to call someone who want to fight back an agent. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can do that. We can do that for sure. I appreciate that. Black Steel, what would you like to shout out this week?
I want to shout out my aunt. Tomorrow's her 73rd birthday, so you know, just wish my aunt happy birthday. We're getting ready to celebrate it. You know, we got to celebrate our elders while they're still here. Shout out to the chat. You know, good show, except for the trolls, Like Your Life, and everybody. I had a great time. See y'all next week.
See you next week, Black Steel. Thanks for coming through. By the way, you guys check out the shorts that I'll be putting out from Shoot the Breeze. Black Steel featured in a lot of them this past week. So make sure to check them out. I'm sure, you've been here for the show, but, still give the short some love, give them a thumbs up. Hopefully they'll show up in someone's algorithm and change the minds of some people.
Don't ever see your shorts. I see all your posts, but I don't ever see your shorts when you put them in. Never. I ain't even know you put shorts out. I see I respond to your posts, but I haven't seen a short.
Yeah. I don't know how they do the shorts. I don't know if you have to be looking at shorts for the shorts from people you subscribe to come up. I'm not sure how that works, but if you go to the channel and you go under the shorts tab, you'll see a lot of shorts up there. Many were from Black Steel because he's been with me the last few weeks, but Andy McPhail, some from Buana, some from Brother Bakari too. So you guys go check them out, man. With that said, Trigger Happy in the chat shouts out Senegal for winning AFCON. He says, I didn't realize AFCON became more global, but Senegal beat Morocco. Morocco was cheating. Morocco was mistreating some Senegalese in the stadium or something too, right? Trying to forcibly remove them and stuff like that, if I remember correctly. There was a prompt about AFCON. I'm going to bring it next week. Should have brought it this week. I'll bring it next week so we can discuss that. Buana, what would you like to shout out this week?
Yeah, so shout out to my mom. You know what I mean? She's with the ancestors right now in the ancestral realm. Shout out to Brother Bakari, not Brother Bakari, Koku's dad, who's with the ancestors right now. Lord knows, sometimes I wish I was where he is right, but needless to say, shout out to all my good brothers who showed support and gave condolences. You all showed real brotherhood in what you all did, and I really appreciate you all for what you all did, man. And that's really it. I'll end it there.
Appreciate all of that, man. So without further ado, that's the show for tonight. We ought to be back next week, Saturday. Hopefully Jacadero will join us next week as well. So, man, you guys be good. We'll talk during the week. We'll see how the snowstorm stuff works out up here in the Northeast. If I'm snowed in, maybe I do that show that Brother Bakari was talking about. So we'll see. Until then, man, you guys be good. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.